We're live. Kevin Burch, welcome back. We started on episode 3. Felt like we were just getting into things as the podcast ended. So we've got you back. Parenting coach, dad to a newborn, Theodore. A whole world of expertise in masculine, feminine coaching, confidence coaching, you name it. You are the guy who, when I have a client who's dealing with children and issues, I'm like, you need to go see Kevin. You're right up there with the fellow coaches that I refer to. So thank you for coming back. And thank you for coming back. How many days after your son was born?
He'll be 2 weeks old tomorrow. So 13.
13 days after your son is born. I feel honoured. Honoured. I'm like, man. And do you know what? That's a good way to segue into the difference between men and women. I want to just get straight into it today. If a woman tried to get on a podcast 13 days after giving birth, I would assert she might feel a bit shaky and a bit tired. A man, on the other hand, can do this. And yet, society is telling us we're all the same, Kevin. What do you say about that?
Well, yeah, I think, men and women are different, right? And I think that is obvious to everybody at a biological level of, reproduction. So what we're experiencing, what my wife and I are experiencing right now, or have been experiencing the last 9.5 months, getting pregnant, having a baby, etc., her breastfeeding. Everyone's like, well, obviously men and women are different in those regards. But, how different is the question that people, I think, get very confused about. And so they think, well, hang on, if there's more men studying engineering than there are women studying engineering, is that because men and women are different? Or is that, sexism, the patriarchy, and little girls are being put in little pink dresses and forced to play with pink dollies, and they're not being allowed to play with blue trucks and stuff like that? So is it socialization? And the answer is it's going to be some of both. And the answer also is that there's going to be overlap, which is another reason why confusion comes in, I think. So I think in this whole thing about when we talk about sex differences, it's really important it's really valuable to bear in mind the following metaphor, right? Men are taller than women, but obviously some women are really tall and obviously some men are really short, right? So if you were drawing the bell curve of height against, you'd have very few short people, then you have more people, there's average height, and then you go down, there's very few tall people, right? So if you have those two lines for men and women, there would be overlap, but they wouldn't be exact overlap. There'd be some overlap, and some, I've known women who are 6'1", 6'2" is basically my height, and then I've known men who are like 5'2". So they exist, but men are taller than women, and that applies to so many different things, aspects of our biology and of our psychology and neurology as well. And so if you kind of want to reject that and fight against it and go, no, we're all the same, then you're going to be really frustrated and upset because it ain't going to pan out like that. Whereas if you want to, the thing to do is to be able to understand and navigate that world and appreciate that men and women are different and there's an overlap, and, value and appreciate those things and be okay with it. Just be at peace with reality the way it is, rather than thinking it's some kind of bad thing.
Boom. We're into the subject. Just
was
like
that. Was that controversial? That seems really, really anodyne and basic and obvious.
Well,
and simple.
But I think that's the thing. And it's why I like doing podcasts, right? Because we can actually have a 2 or 3 hour conversation about this, not do a soundbite like you love Twitter, right? So you could put one of your comments on Twitter like, men and women are different, and then with no context and no further comment and nothing else, and then boom, off we go in this like rah, and people get offended and upset and all that. I think for me that's half the problem at the moment, is that there's a lot of sound bites and a lot of it's black and white, isn't it? And what you've just described is it's not black and white. In the main, men are taller, and there are taller women and there are shorter men. And when you get the full context, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I can get with that. But when you just go men are taller, we have this, huge.
And the other thing is, the other thing that's so important in that is not to think that it's good or bad to be short or tall. Because if you say being tall is good and men are taller, then it's like, that, oh, what you're saying, that women aren't as good or inferior in some way. It's like, no, let's not take that out. Now, of course, in some ways, you go, well, being tall is good. Being tall is useful. But actually, the taller you are, the more likely you are to die earlier, right? Taller people live less time. So a guy who's a foot shorter than me is probably, statistically, on average, going to live longer than me. So, you know, that's a bit of a drawback of being tall. So it's not black and white, right? So, you know, obviously women live longer than men. Is it fully explained by height? I don't know. Maybe it's a factor. So it's the labelling of the differences as good or bad. Now, we have this we're going to jump a little bit advanced now in a way, because consider that human beings have a tendency to value women more than men. What? You don't mean that?
Kevin, you can't say that. How dare you? We've been brutalized for eternity. What do you mean, Kevin?
I'll present there's the evidence, and then there's the kind of evolutionary basis of that, right?
Yeah.
So the evolutionary basis would be the following. If you're living as humans have lived for like forever until about 5 minutes ago, if you're living in tribal groups of hunter-gatherers, right? So modern humans, Homo sapiens, been around 70,000 years. Precursors of the other types of hominids before that, maybe, I don't know, 300,000, 400,000, 500,000, something like that, right? So there's a long history here. And then it's only in the last 12,000 years, and in some areas much less, that we've had agriculture and we've started to settle down and go from being hunter-gatherers to living in stable settlements. So what we're seeing now, obviously the industrial age, etc., is all incredibly recent. And in terms of evolution, we are still hunter-gatherers. In terms of our minds and our bodies and our neurology and our hormones and all that kind of stuff, we've still got the bodies of hunter-gatherers. There haven't been enough generations for there to be, well, maybe a few little changes, but very little really. So if you're living in that situation, hunter-gatherers, you might live in a tribe, a tribal group of, say, 100 people. Now those 100 people, that band, there's 50 males, 50 females. And of those, the ones that are most important for the survival of the group are the reproductive age females, because you've got maybe 20, 25 reproductive age females. So you can have, as a whole group, 20, 25 babies a year. Well, every 2 years, really, right? 25 babies every 2 years. Now, bear in mind that 50% of those kids are probably going to not even make their first birthday, let alone their 5th birthday. So the infant mortality rate is really, really high. So if you want your band to survive and to, you know, just maintain its numbers, you're reliant on this subset of reproductive age females. So if one of those reproductive age females dies, it's a really, really, really big deal, and it really hits the whole band. It really affects your ability to sustain yourselves. Whereas if a male of the same age, if a 25, 30-year-old male dies, yes, it's bad, but guess what? One of the other males can still father children with his woman or whatever, right? There's no shortage of sperm. Sperm is cheap, eggs are expensive, right? So there's this inbuilt biological reason why we're going to be more concerned about preserving and protecting the lives and the well-being of the reproductive age females. So consider that's the underlying evolutionary mechanism.
Yeah.
Now, ways in which you see this, so research has been done on this. When people talk about sex differences, some sex differences can be perceived to be making men sound better than women. So, you know, being stronger, for example. Some sex differences can be perceived to be making women sound better than men. So being more empathetic, for example, right?
Yeah.
Now, when you take those scientific results of a sex difference and you present it to people and you say to them, you know, this is what we've found, some people will be accepting of it, some people will be skeptical, right? Some people will believe it, some people won't. And what the evidence shows is that when you present them a result which makes men sound good or better than women, people tend to be more skeptical of it. Whereas when you present them with a result which makes women sound better than men, people tend to go, oh yeah, that's true. And they're more embracing of it. So they're more predisposed, even though the evidence is as strong in both cases, they're more skeptical of stuff that makes men look good and stuff that makes women look good. Now, who is it that's reacting that way? It's women and men. Both women and men are more welcoming and embracing and believing of stuff that tends to make women look better. So it's not just one, it's not just women that are doing it. Men, I think, favoring stuff. No, both sexes do that. So consider that's, I can't remember why I started off with that bit, but basically women are valued more. And so actually the kind of, you know, the classic call of the sinking of the Titanic, women and children first, women and children in the lifeboats first, right? This is a classic thing that we've all seen in old movies, also women and children first, right? Because men protect women in general. Some men don't, some men are bad, right? But in general, men protect women. Is another illustration of that.
And that is also now being perceived as bad. It's like that, and again, it's that whether you perceive it's good or bad, it doesn't work. But it's that whole. It feels like, speaking as a woman, there's this movement from a certain group of women, like, we don't need protecting, we don't need men, and it's like, man, why would you say that? That's like men going, we don't need women, we don't need, the nurturing side of coming home and being able to have, all of the things that women do great. But what?
Because in everything there's pluses and minuses to everything, right? And everything there's challenges. So of course that masculine protectiveness and leadership, even if you want to call it that, can be dictatorial control. So it depends how you see it and what your experience is. And if you are wounded in your relationship, if you have an unhappy relationship with the masculine, for example, as a young girl, if you have an unhappy relationship with your father, then you may feel you need to protect yourself against him. And you may need to feel you have to protect yourself against the masculine, and you may feel dominated and controlled and be pushing away and making a lot of noise about that. So, so for example, let's take the example of walking, because I've got a 2-week-old son, I've got a 19-year-old daughter, as you know, so very different mum, very different stage of life. I was also been a stepfather to a stepson before that. But if I walk my daughter down the aisle at her wedding, does that mean I'm handing over control because I'm the one in charge and I'm saying, right, she belonged to me, now she belongs to you, her husband? Or, because you could see it like that, and a lot of people do see it like that, and they go, oh, that's really patriarchal. Or, no, it's about me handing over the role of protector. Because you better believe that I'm a protector to my daughter, right? You better believe that. And when she marries, when she marries, it's like, well, now that's, I'm trusting that to you, this guy, right? Who, I will have a relationship with and know as well. And you know what? I'll still be her protector, because if she actually ran into trouble with him and, he wasn't protecting her or he was abusing her or something, obviously I would be there in a shot, right? But I'm handing over to him. So the symbolism could be of control and oppression and patriarchal dictatorialness, or it could be of nurture and protection and provision as well. And how do you want to see it? And if you assume the worst and assume that everything's, just because we tend, of course, as human beings, to take our own childhood wounds through our lives, right? And that's inevitable. We all do that. We never fully get away from that. And if we then assume everything's a reenactment of that, we're seeing things through a negative lens, and then the world seems like a hostile, dangerous, oppressive place.
Yeah, and I think I can really relate to that, having done a lot of work on my childhood, right? And I don't think we can get away from this conversation without bringing that up. And in some ways, I don't think we talk about that enough. Actually, generally, it's like, are you at peace with your childhood? I'd say most people aren't. What does it take to become at peace with your childhood? Quite a lot. Even if you had you could look at my childhood and go, nothing really wrong, no major overt quote unquote abuse, middle class, fairly wealthy, yada yada, but actually some stuff that I made mean that really didn't work, that I've taken in. And people that know me, including yourself, know my relationship roller coaster over a couple of decades before I really got it flat. And actually dealing with my parental relationship to then have a successful relationship and be able to be a parent in a different way was massive. So I think it's a really good point to bring up, that actually a lot of the upset is not upset at men or women, it's upset at our parents from when we were children, and then it's playing out in this kind of punishing way later on. I mean, for me, the irony in a lot of the movement that I have it is against men, especially you white heterosexual males, god damn you for all you've done, that kind of narrative that's out there. It's kind of ironic because the so-called punished are becoming the punisher. I mean, it's the classic triangle, right? Persecutors become the persecuted is becoming the persecutor and doing exactly what they're claiming was done to them.
Yeah.
While somehow that's okay. How do we get out of that? How do we change that narrative?
As you said, doing the work on yourself, confronting your own childhood challenges and healing those wounds within yourself is not a 5-minute job, and it takes guts, and most people will be like, oh, where do I start, and all that kind of stuff. I think as a rule of thumb, the first principle is to look at people who have done that, who are at peace with their childhood and have done healing, and hang out with and listen to them. That's the bottom line, right? That's the really simple thing, right? Now, so for example, one of the things that I do sometimes tweet about is only learn from people who've got the results you want. So if you want to have a great marriage, don't go around listening to incels, single guys who are angry at women because they can't get a girlfriend. Don't go around listening to angry feminists who think all men are bastards. Don't go around listening to bitter divorcees. Like I had a conversation with a guy, interaction chain on Twitter this week, and he was like, because I said something about the question that someone had posed was, how can I help my husband transition into being a father, because they're about to have a baby, right? The woman's heavily pregnant, right? How can I help you? How can I facilitate that, right? And I said something about, well, let him be a father, don't expect him to be another mother. And tell him that he has it in him just as much as you have the capacity to conceive, grow life, and give birth in you, right? Like it's that innate in him, right? And it's a very short tweet. And then some guys saying, that's exactly what went wrong in my marriage. She wanted me to be like a woman. She wanted me to be a mother to my kids, and I didn't want to be that, and that's why it all went wrong. I was like, yeah, okay. And then he started going on and he actually put underneath that, this is the guy he's got adult children like 29, 30, right? So he's the guy in his late 50s, and he put under that, young men, do not get married, it will make your life hell. And I'm like, whoa, no, we're not on the same page anymore, bud. That is not the message to be. Just because you haven't sorted it out, because you failed, you chose the wrong woman, you set something up that was crap, doesn't mean, and you're hurt. Don't tell all the young men to give up hope and just, watch porn and never have. Do you wish your children had never been born?
Don't deal with that sex over there. That's horrible.
Does he wish his children had never been born, or does he wish is he glad they were born, but he wishes he'd never married their mum? It's like, come on, he hasn't thought this through. Like, he's got unhealed wounds. So there's all this dialogue, and it's like, so he's a great example of the bitter divorcee that if you want to have a great marriage, do not listen to him. And he's then saying, oh, but all the people I know are married, all the guys are really miserable. After the honeymoon years, it became crap and they're just putting up with it and they feel trapped. That's who you're hanging out with, bud. They're the people that you are choosing as friends. So, of course, that's his reality. So if you listen to bitter divorcees, people who moan about their spouses, or people who are single and moan about the opposite sex, or just who are single in general, and you look to those people for relationship and marriage advice, it's the wrong people. You want to look at people who are happily married and have been happily married for a significant period of time, not 6 months, right? But
and that reminds me of, so shout out to Judy May, who said something similar to me a long time ago. So Judy May's another coach, Judy May, right? And she said, find 3 couples that you'd like a relationship like them. And I actually said to her, I did a inventory of like,
I don't know any.
I don't fucking know any. I was like, I don't know. There's no one I know in a relationship that I'm like, oh man, they have the best. She was like, you need to go and find 3 couples.
Yes, you need to find those motherfuckers. That's the whole point, isn't it? Right. Otherwise, you're the whole. It's like it's cause and effect. The reason you don't know any because you're not at that level in that way, and then you get this keeps you stuck. So it's like, okay, go and find the people. So if I want a fit body, if I want to be healthy, it's no good hanging out with or following on social media very overweight people go, oh no, fit any size, feel good about yourself the way you are. I mean, I don't want to shame people or feel bad, but if I want a fit body, I need to find people who've got fit bodies, or even better, people who used to have an unfit body and have transformed it, right? So in every area, find people who've got the results the kind of results that you want, and hang out with them, because their mentality, their ways of thinking, their assumptions about the world will rub off on you. So this whole, if I've got issues with my childhood, and my mum had me when she was 16, and my parents split up. I lost track with him, contact with my dad almost immediately, and my mum was divorced 3 times by the time I turned 18. Right, so when it came to understanding relationships and marriage, in my head it was all just chaos and pain and awkwardness. Right, so if I just go through that with, oh yeah, that's the way it is, and hang out with other people who think similarly, because birds of a feather flock together, I was doomed. And so, sure enough, I was married for 9-10 years, and then we divorced, and it wasn't that great, right? But then it's like, no, I need to transform that. I need to start hanging out with people who have got happy marriages and who are at peace with their childhood, and learn from those people. Read their books, go on their courses, listen to their podcasts, etc. So that is what becomes my reality, and it may involve actually letting go of some people that I've hung out with before, or keeping them as friends, but not at a bit more distance, because I don't want to be thinking like them all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's like one of the standards in my book is don't speak to the naysayers, speak to the yay sayers. And it's that. And it's really interesting, actually. I think of it in terms of wealth. I'm like, don't get money advice from poor people. Don't do it. Stop it.
Same thing.
And it's the same thing, but I've never kind of, the way you've just sort of said it, it's like, God, it's so obvious now you said it. But actually, we don't do it. There's not that. With fitness or with money, it kind of feels more obvious than actually with relationships. And then it's like, wow, yeah, actually. And the number of people that have great relationships also, I have it is quite small. Right?
I have it that it's quite small as well. So but then the number of people who have financial freedom is pretty damn small,
it's
right?
Quite small.
You manage to find them, don't you? Hang out with them, so it can be done, right?
Well, no, I'm finding them by getting other people to do it too, because that was the problem. I didn't find very many of them, so I was like, right, I need some friends who are financially free. Let's create it.
Okay.
Really, yeah.
But you can still find their books, right? And you've been on their courses and had them as coaches and mentors and all that kind of stuff. So the same principle applies. I mean, obviously everyone's dealing with what they're dealing with. And in most areas of life, the people that are doing really well, and we think, oh yeah, they're doing really well, that's inspiring, are a small minority. That's just the way, most people are doing average, right? Obviously, by definition. And today, I mean, 200 years ago, it might be different, but today, when it comes to intimate relationship, the average is to be divorced, or to be unhappily married, or to be unhappily single.
Well, right? We're both divorced, right?
We're both divorced. We've both been unhappily married. We've both been unhappily single, right? But now we're both happily married, right? So if you said to me 10, 20 years ago, because I met my wife, 10 and a half years ago, right? So even 10 years ago, when I was still single, or 15, 20, 30, Kevin, give me relationship advice. Like, are you mad? You shouldn't be coming to me for relationship advice. But now I've got 10 and a half year track record and all the things that I've done. Now I'm I've got the results, right? And it's a great relationship, which is very different to the relationship I had with my first wife in many very important ways. And so now I have something to say about it, which I think is of value to people. And going back to the conversation that you were having on Twitter with this guy that was clearly very angry about women, just to pick back up on the point that mums and dads are different, which is one of the reasons for this podcast, right? Or one of the themes of this podcast, along with, men and women are different, shock horror. What's it like being, and this is really for the women listening, right? Because you're very articulate. What's it like being a dad, and how do you do it differently to women? So how speaking from as a coach and also as a dad, speaking on behalf of all the dads that are like, stop making me be a mother. I'm not a mother. What's it like for you? And how can women facilitate that? Like, how can we as women go, and for me, I mean, I know there's some things like Owen will be much more rough with the boys. And I just go, and I'm blessed, right? I've got Owen, and then we've got four grandfathers for these kids, and there's a lot of men around. I feel very lucky for my 2 little boys that they have a lot of men around, and I'm actually I just let them get on with it. It's almost like, do what you do, but how do women who are like, no, he's too rough with my kids, or he's too hard on my kids, all of that stuff, what do you say to that? Like, what's it like being a man, and what do you say to women? Okay, you asked me a few different questions here. So what you've just expressed, your way of dealing with it, I think is great. It's a great way of dealing with it, and go, well, they're going to do their boy stuff, and I'm just going to let them to it. Obviously, you know, if there's a dad who's literally abusing the child or whatever, it's a different thing. So let's take that as read, right? But
yeah, and important to say.
And important to acknowledge that obviously sometimes things are toxic. So it's not about just give them carte blanche to mistreat your child, obviously. And they are going to be rougher. They are going to be more challenging. They are going to be sterner. One of the other things actually that came up on Twitter this week was a woman saying, "Oh, I don't think men realize how much kinder they are towards women they find attractive," right? But men are kinder towards women they find attractive versus women they don't, right? And obviously there's some truth to that. And I replied, just for the hell of it, I don't think women realize how much kinder men are to women than they are to other men, which is another big truism, right? So when women say, "Oh, we should all be treated the same, you guys should treat men and women the same," what they're really saying is you should treat the other men like women, because if you treated everyone the same and you treated me, a woman, like a man, I wouldn't like it, right? The men are really challenging and can be quite brutal and short with each other. And if women get talked to like that by men, they do not like it. They're in for a big shock and a surprise, right? So be careful what you wish for. You don't really want that, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress. But they're going to be rougher. They're going to throw, you know, the kid is going to go higher on the swing when the dad is swinging the kid, not when the mum. Like, everyone knows this, right? How's this controversial, right? Or, you know, you throw it up higher and catch it. And you're like, oh, I used to put my daughter onto my shoulders, and when she was like 2, and I would hold her hot thighs, and I'd put her on my shoulders, and I would then throw her forwards and swing her out and swing her right. So her head went about that far from the ground, and swing her around, and then swing her back up, and then catch her, let go of her, and then catch her under the arms, then put her back up and repeat. And her mum would be going, "Oh my God," right? And obviously, Imogen loved it. She thought it was the best thing ever. She had no fear, right?
Yeah.
So like one of the jobs of the man is to expand that comfort zone for the child. And obviously, with boys, that's going to be even more the case. They're going to go off and do rough and tumble stuff in another level, right? Like even with my daughter, I was doing that. So you know, embrace that. Let that happen. Similarly, men will tend to have it. You know, if dads go out for the day with their kids, they will tend to just go, right? So think of the cliche, which is when blokes go to football and blokes to sports events, and blokes will travel in England. This is to the other end of the country for on public transport, and all they've got is their t-shirt and their wallet and their phone. That's it. And that's it. They haven't got anything with them, right? So everything that comes up, they've got to deal with it as, you know, they're freezing cold, they get wet, they lose stuff. You know, it's like they just have to deal with it because they don't take anything with them. They do not have a handbag, let alone a bloody suitcase, right? And they've travelled, you know, 5 or 6 hours by train to the other end of the country for a football match. That's what the masculine does. The masculine just goes, right, we'll go, get out the front door, and we'll deal with it on the way. We'll figure it out. We'll find the resource we need. Whereas the feminine will tend to go, let's pack 1,000,001 bloody things in the kitchen sink, right?
I have a Facebook chat to discuss and plan who's taking what and what time we're meeting and what's the plan for each meal. You know, I've just been on a girls' weekend and done that, right? It's like WhatsApp chat, everyone's bringing something, there's a plan, things are booked. We've all bought like 6 pairs of shoes because we don't know what the weather's going to be like.
Yeah. Whereas when I'm going my guys' weekends, I've got 3 friends that I've known since I was at school, 3 of us, and we rotate around the country and do like every 6 months we go to another. And literally, it's like we turn up with 1 pair of trousers, 1 pair of shoes. You know, if we go out and if we just spill beer on ourselves or something happened, we'd be like, "Oh shit, I've got to wear this for the rest of the weekend now." Like we don't bring like outfits. Do you know what I mean? And we don't. Sometimes there'll be a plan. What's that? Or we'll turn up and go, "What's the plan?" "Oh, there's a football match." We'll go, "Oh, okay." It's very much like that. So they're going to be like that with taking the kids out, and that's fine because that's good. And both, one is not better than the other. They are both of value, and your boys benefit from going off with you on this kind of organised, got all the ducks in a row, bag pack type scenario, and they also benefit from going off with their dad with chuck it, just go and not even be thinking about it. So and girls, so it's like just embrace the fact that he's going to do it his way and be different, and he's not going to be. And also, I think so. That's the key, which you're talking about. You also asked me, what's it like being a dad? And I think there's a sense of real responsibility. Now, obviously, I'm not a woman, I'm not a mother, so I can't speak from experience, but I would guess that mothers feel that too, a sense of responsibility for, keeping the child alive, producing the food to feed it, that kind of stuff. But there's a kind of protection of the family unit responsibility that men will feel, and a desire to provide. And you might go, oh, that's all socially constructed, and they don't need to feel that, and that's really bad and what's up. This goes back a long way, right? Again, it's ingrained into our DNA, because guess what? When a woman is 6 or 7 months pregnant with your child, and the flipping neighbouring tribe come over the hill with their bows and arrows, or the lion attacks the camp, she can't defend herself. She's relying on me to do that. Oh, and when she's got a baby that's 2, 3, 4, 6, 12 months old that she's feeding at her breast, again, she can't defend herself with the baby. She's relying on me for that, right? So of course we've got this protective responsibility, and we become more attuned to risk, as of course women do as well, as mothers do. So there is it could be seen as like a burden, but it's all part of the journey, and most guys embrace it, and it makes us grow and become stronger and reach heights that we perhaps didn't know we had. Just that's the common, of course, for women as well, for mothers.
And how, speaking to guys, if guys have got a wife who's trying to turn them into a mother, how do guys deal with that? What do they say so it doesn't end in this like fight, friction, each trying to make the other one be like them?
Okay, so I can't really answer that in a sentence, but I think this is...
Sorry, we've got hours.
Yeah. Well, this is when I think it's worth talking about the whole masculine feminine thing, right? Because we're talking about mother and father, but this applies whether you've got kids or not, and it applies to flipping so many things. And this is something that I struggled with and didn't understand until I probably learned about it 13, 14 years ago, and it changed my life, and it has not just changed my relationship life and my parenting life, and how I parent, but also like the world makes sense now in a way that it didn't before. And so, because I grew up thinking that men and women were the same, like obviously at some level I knew it wasn't, but in my head there was this kind of assumption, I think men and women were the same, even though there were contradictory beliefs as well, that was in there. And when I talked to my mother about this, I don't know, 15 years ago or something, I said, at some point I meant, and she said, oh yeah, I thought that too. She thought that. And I think she still probably thinks it more than I do, right? But she had that idea as well. So of course I was going to think that. And my mother was my only consistent figure in my life, of course. And so I was kind of brought up in a kind of feminized way in some ways. Yeah. And I've got some great feminine traits that I'm very happy with. Good at talking, for example. But in some ways it didn't serve me well in relationships, that's for sure. And so basically the distinction is this. So again, we've got our like heights, right? The overlap. There's some men are taller than women, shorter than women, and some women are really tall, all that kind of stuff. But basically, you think about masculine and feminine energies is the way to think of it. And so most
and that then, just to not miss out gay and lesbian relationships, parenting, all of that. Again, if we talk masculine and feminine traits, not gender, that's what you're speaking now, right?
That's right. So I'm sorry. I'm saying I'm talking about masculine and feminine traits, and everybody's got both. Yeah, everybody's got both. That's what I was going to say. Me, you, whether you're gay, straight, whatever. Everyone's masculine and feminine, and the ratio will tend to be different. So most men will be more masculine than feminine, and most women will be more feminine than masculine. But not all. There'll be some men who are really feminine and some women who are really masculine or whatever. Doesn't mean they need to change their sex. Doesn't mean they're born in the wrong body. It just means they're that, right? Now, so masculine traits are the traits that, tend to occur more in men. So the masculine is very much goal orientated, very much about strategy and direction and getting somewhere. So if you think about sports, right, literally scoring the goal, crossing the line, achieving that thing, building up to it. If you think about the male attitude, stereotypical male attitude to sex and shopping, in both cases, know what I want, go there, get in, get what I want, get out. Right?
I love how sex and shopping just became the same thing. That's
because they're both examples of the classic masculine approach. Whereas the female approach to sex and shopping is to kind of, wander about, take your time, have a look. Oh, what about this? This might be nice. And sometimes they're happy to enjoy it, even if they don't buy anything. Right? So, some women do enjoy sex even if they don't have an orgasm, right? It's possible. So, and again, that's not to say that, you can go, what are you saying? No, I'm just saying that men and women are different classically in attitudes to sex and shopping. But some men love shopping and some women hate it and all that stuff. So it's not as simple as that, but these are general truths, of course, right? So the masculine energy is like that sport, crossing the goal line, being strategic, being future orientated, and wanting to do things, right? Whereas, and breaking through. So David Dieda, who's the guy who I learned this, so I thought, wow, this really makes sense, and really maybe the light's gone for me. There's many others, Mars, Venus, and all that kind of stuff. Says, you know, the masculine searches for freedom, right? What the masculine wants is freedom and release. Okay, and that's what crossing that goal line or achieving that orgasm is about for the masculine. Whereas the feminine is about being in the moment. It's not about strategic and future and achieving a goal. It's about feeling emotions of all sorts, and what Dieda would say is relaxing into love, feeling love, being in the flow of the moment.
Yeah.
So it's more present rather than strategic and thinking about the future. And again, if you think about a dating situation, the classic dating situation is two people go out on a date, a man and a woman. The guy has it all mapped out in his head how he wants to get her back to his place, etc. Oh, come back and see my etchings or my photos of when I went traveling in wherever it is or whatever, right? And now because she doesn't have that idea, she says, oh, I just see what feels right to me in the moment. And then she says, oh, if it feels bad, she goes, no, not with it. If it feels good, she goes, oh, she may go with it. No, it feels good, it feels good. And then, oh, I just went back to we just went back to look at the photos, and I didn't know you never guess what happened. I wasn't expecting that, right? Because she wasn't thinking, and everyone's like, are you nuts? It was obvious what was going to happen, right? But she's like, oh, but she didn't. She has plausible deniability, which protects her kind of honor, if you like.
Yeah, reputation, all that.
Reputation, that kind of stuff. And she also, but it was also genuinely true. If she got back there and looked at the photos and liked the photos, but felt uncomfortable about, I don't know, his smelly bedroom or something, she wasn't going to, she would have had no problem leaving or rejecting him at that point. Whereas, he was, on a trying to achieve a goal more. And that's not bad or wrong if you label either of. So the man might say, oh, well, she changed her mind. She came back to my house, then she bloody changed her mind and she wouldn't put out. And oh God, women are so unpredictable and hard to understand, right? And she might go, oh, but he had only one thing in his mind and he was really, really focused on it. He was trying to achieve that. Men are so directional and they don't listen to their feelings in the moment.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, they're different, aren't they? I mean, they obviously overlap, but they're different. So you can argue about it and go, they're wrong the way they are. But that's like expecting the sun to be green. The sun isn't green. So, you've got to deal with reality as it is. So, and the fact is, when you then embrace those realities, that's what's beautiful, because what men and women love about each other, heterosexual couples where it's a masculine man and a feminine woman, that's the vast majority. At their core, deep down, we're talking a minute about how that can get covered up and lost, right? That's what's core deep down. That femininity of her, that kind of unpredictability, that inconsistency, if you like, that kind of slight irrationality, changing her mind, not going with the flow of her emotions in the moment, is something that men can find really irritating and annoying, but it's the thing that really turns them on and they find really attractive, right? And that's what's so beautiful about it, right? Or about them. And similarly, that guy being, watching sports, the fact that he's driven and goal-directed and wants to achieve stuff and take leadership, that's what a feminine woman will actually go, oh yeah, that's really attractive, right? So when a man says, oh, I wish my girlfriend, my woman, was more like my mates. No, you don't. Because if she was like your mates, you wouldn't fancy her anymore. If she suddenly became logical, rational, and just spoke in monosyllables and wanted to watch the ball game with you all the time, that would kill your attraction for her. Similarly, if a woman goes, oh, I wish he talked about his feelings more, I wish he was more like my girlfriend. It's like, well, yes, sometimes I'm good. I can talk about my feelings. It's useful to some degree, right? But if you try and feminize him and make him be like your girlfriends, and he becomes like one of your girlfriends and wants to sit around and just chat and moan, or talk about how upset he was and how his day was really tough and the person at work was mean to him, you'll just start to lose respect for him, and again, it will kill the attraction. So be really
which then in terms kills the sex life, which then it's just
right, and that's what happens a lot of the time, right? Which is then why you have people saying that. So. One piece I realised I haven't pissed out. So the caricature, if you like, the classic example of the masculine is guys watching sport, right? So this is when you have a group of guys, they're watching, they're not even playing the game, but they're watching it, and they're watching those guys on the pitch, on the field of play, putting it all on the line, right? Those guys are like, they're like gladiators in the arena, And if they don't perform, they get absolutely slaughtered, right? And people will pull no punches in the criticism they give to them if they feel like they're not giving it their all and putting their bodies on the line, right? And of course, sometimes they actually do get physically injured, right? And then the feminine women may, if they don't understand men, be going, oh God, they're so rolling her eyes. Why are they watching football all the time? It's so pointless. It's just kicking the ball about. It's so mad. No, what it symbolises, what it represents, is basically war and battle, but stylised and about achieving and
winning
for goals. Winning to the victor goes the spoils, right? Absolutely, right? And then the feminine cliche, if you like, caricature, is a group of women who get together to sit and have coffee and chat and chat and chat and chat. And then a man overhearing it thinks, what the fuck are they talking about? They're not fucking talking about anything. Like nothing happens, right? There's no decisions. There's no action points. There's no progress. They're not resolving any problems. They're not doing anything. They're just chatting for like the pointless sake of it. So the masculine doesn't get it, right? But of course, for them, it's all about relating and connecting and feeling connected.
Yeah, and supporting and nurturing. And I mean, I've just done that for the weekend, right? Shout out to Vanessa and Sarah and Hazel. We met on Friday morning. We left on Sunday afternoon. We spent the entire time chatting and eating. That's all we did. So it's absolutely right.
So, yeah, and so I said, yeah, with shopping and sex, yeah, but in everything this plays out. So now, coming back to your question, you said about mothers and fathers. It's like when you embrace those two sides and you see that, you know, the man is masculine and the woman is feminine, it all just works so much better. And that's whether it's in parenting or whether you haven't got kids or whether you're in the dating game. You know, so you know, if you're single and you want to date and you're a guy, pay for the first date. Do not let her pay. Do not split the bloody bill. Do not say to her, oh, shall we split the bill? What do you want to do? Fuck that shit. Pay. And if you haven't got much money, as I didn't when I was dating and I met my wife, don't go for dinner. Just go for coffee somewhere. You can pay for a flipping coffee, right? It's not about the money or not. It's about the symbolism of you taking the lead and being the guy in the situation. And if you're the woman and you want to attract a masculine guy, then let him pay. Don't go, oh, hang on a minute. I want to pay my half of this because, you know, no, just back off and let him. So it applies at every stage. Now, once you start to see that, and you start to see that, so the masculine and the feminine we talked about, everybody's got both. Everybody's got both, but in differing ratios generally. So some women will be predominantly masculine, some men will be predominantly feminine, some will be kind of 50-50, but the vast majority, 80% plus of guys are at their core more masculine and women at their core are more feminine. Once you start to see that, not only does your dating life improve massively and your marriage improve massively, but loads of other things in wider society make sense as well. And the way people treat each other differently and all that kind of stuff. Now, but there's the problem that is so rampant today is that people have lost touch with that. So if we go back to, say, David Dieda again, we talk about the three stages of masculine and feminine. So the stage one was the kind of, you know, what you might think of as 1950s America, white picket fence, you know, he makes the money, he, you know, goes out and fights with his buddy, you know, has fights at the weekend and gets pissed and watches sport. And then she does as she's told, and she just sits at home and has babies, and that's it, right?
Gets dinner on the table at a certain time.
Has dinner on the table at a certain time, which is all great, but it's like she doesn't have any choice about that. The roles are very rigid and separated. So he's very much his masculine, she's very much in her feminine. So he has the financial power as well as physical strength, of course. He has the financial power to ratchet, but she has the sexual power, so she may withhold sex and sexual favors and all that kind of stuff. That mentality, rather than sex being something you do together, it's like it's something that, you know, I grant him as a favor kind of thing, right? So that would be the kind of, you know, post-war, certainly obviously pre-war as well, way of doing things. And there's certain there's certain good things about that too, right? But we've moved on from that. Pretty much everybody who's listened to this has moved on from that. But then what David Dieda said, the second stage, when you have feminism, it's everything, is basically what you're saying is women can express their masculine. So they can be chief executives, they can wear business suits, they can be prime ministers, of course, all that stuff. And they can be goal orientated and directed and leadership and achieve. And they have that option. And men similarly have that option to change the nappies, change the diapers, to be soft, to grow their hair long, to, you know, flower power, all this kind of stuff, to dance in the woods together if they really want to, that kind of thing, right? So men are have more permission socially now to be in touch with their feminine side. And in many ways, that's progress from the 50s model, in my view. But if you then get stuck in the idea that, oh, well, I'm 50% masculine, 50% feminine, or, you know, we've got to promote women in the boardroom and promote men to dance more in the woods with flowers in their hair.
Equal outcomes rather than equal opportunity.
Right, bingo, exactly that. And so that's where people get stuck. And that's when there are guys like I was who are out of touch with their masculine core, and women who are out of touch with their feminine core, and they go into intimate relationship, and she's thinking, but hang on, if he makes more money than me, or if he stays, if I'm staying at home, if I'm only working part-time and he's working full-time, or if he's making decisions about, you know, some other aspect, where we go for dinner, then that's like oppressive, and that's bad, and that's wrong, and it's supposed to be about equality. And you get guys going, oh, I shouldn't be making more money than her, and I shouldn't be making decisions about, I've got to ask her about everything, consult everything, you know. And it leads to a depolarization, right? So what then you've got the masculine guy, you've got the feminine woman, and he gets more feminized and she gets more masculinized. And actually she gets frustrated with him because he's not taking the lead. I'm having to make all these decisions. And so he can actually go across, and the polarity gets depolarized, or even reverse polarity, where she's wearing the trousers, she's the one making the decisions. He feels like he's emasculated, she's a ball-busting bitch, and she feels like he's wussy wimp, and oh god, I've got to bloody step up and do everything because he can't organize himself and do stuff. And they're deeply frustrated and unhappy with each other. And guess what? They ain't fucking. Right? Because it's all gone, it's fizzled out.
Yeah.
Which is probably what that guy on my Twitter was talking about when he said that that's what destroyed my marriage, and marriage makes your life hell, and, you know, it doesn't work, all that kind of stuff. But that was his experience. It wasn't maybe to do with who he chose, or maybe to do with how he was, that he, you know, I was saying to him, well, you created that situation, buddy.
Yeah, because we can all, you know, I mean, you just described, you know, some of my relationships, right, of what happened. And probably lots of people listening to this are either have been in one or are in one, because it's very common. And I think the bit that I really get now after doing a lot of work is that I created it. It was very easy in the past to blame them, right? So it was very easy for me as a woman to go, oh, the man was, you know, weak and It's like, no, I became a man in our relationship and created that dynamic because I didn't stay feminine. And
So
it's two to dance, right? And, you know, and everyone's playing their part. But
here's the truth bomb. Here's the truth bomb. And it's so obvious when you hear it. You're like, oh my God, that's so obvious. How come I needed to hear this? But until we hear it, all of your past relationships, every single one of them, have one thing in common and one thing only, and it's you. Nothing else. It's you, right? So if you have a pattern in your relationship, I keep choosing guys who are arseholes and, you know, beat me up or whatever. I get choosing guys who cheat or whatever. Or I keep choosing women who just take my money and spend it all, or they cheat, or they do whatever. That's you creating that situation. Right? Yeah. Now that's something that most people do not want to hear. It's something that actually guys, because they're more brutal and honest with each other, are probably better at telling each other. Yeah. Women, ooh, not so much. Women will be very much, you deserve more. You know, you've been so unlucky in love. He was a bastard. Oh, you've been so, you deserve better than that. He treated you so mean. Let's go to a spa day.
Because it's all over there with him.
Yeah, because you can't do it. You're
nothing you can do. It's like, oh God, this is just what happens when, you know.
You're going to repeat it. Right? That's the problem, right? And actually, one of the things that when I first met my wife, we dated for a brief time and it was great and everything, but then I was like, she had stuff in her past, like she'd been married. She'd had a marriage where her parents didn't even know about it. She's from Malaysia, right? So she got married and divorced while at university. Her parents didn't even know, right? Even to the day I met her. They know now, but she didn't know. She then had a marriage where a guy, it's another Malaysian guy, and he'd left her hugely in debt and run up, you know, she'd let him have her credit cards. She'd be earning as a doctor and he'd like been a student. He'd run up all this debt. She then had another relationship with a British guy that had ended with him chucking a coffee over her head when she dumped him outside at a coffee shop, right? So she had there was other things. She had some drama. I remember her saying to me, I haven't got any baggage or drama. And I remember thinking, what? And I said, and when I said, look, this isn't going to work. I mean, you're great in many ways, but this isn't going to work because you say you haven't got any baggage drama, but you've got this, this, and this. And she actually said, "What? Why do you want to end this?" She asked me, right? She wanted the feedback, and I said, "Because of this." And I said, "And all these things." I said, "You're the common denominator in all those situations. You're the common denominator." And she went, "Oh, okay. Well, it's been really nice to knowing you." And she took it really calmly, which was my first kind of, because I was like, "Do I dare to say this?" Because
am I going to get a coffee thrown over me?
Most women will not be happy when you tell them this, right?
Yeah.
And but she took it really calmly, which made me think. And then she told me she got in the car, drove home, cried all the way home, and thought about it. She said she felt like she was hit over the head with a sledgehammer.
Yeah.
And she thought, he's right.
Yeah.
He's right. And then she contacted me a couple of days later and said, I've been thinking about what you said. And suddenly it was like the text message. I was like, wow, we're having a different conversation now, right? Because she had this kind of shift in awareness and insight, and she'd embraced it rather than resisting it and brushing it off, right? And that's when I thought, actually, this woman, maybe this could, because there were lots of other things that were really great, but that was the kind of, I thought, actually, this could really work. And that was, 10 and a half years ago, and we haven't looked back since, right? So this is one of the other things I say to guys: be honest with women, be honest with them, tell them the truth, because 9 out of 10 may be upset and run off screaming and say, "You're so mean to me." But that's also how you will find someone who responds really constructively and positively. And of course, her perception of me and her feelings towards me, women want someone's being truthful and honest. Guys being having integrity is something that healthy women will really appreciate. That's one of the things you go, "Oh my God, okay." So it deepened the attraction on her part. So I think that so I talked about how it can become depolarized. That's very common in modern society. So the question I had when I first read all this, when I first heard all this 13 years ago, whatever it was like, well, am I masculine at my core, or am I feminine at my core? I didn't know. I didn't know. I was so out of touch with it. People who meet me now would be like, "What?" They wouldn't believe it about me. They'd be like, "What? What?" They think of me as quite a masculine guy. I mean, some people say I'm an alpha male or whatever. I don't know. It's others to say. But I never used to get that. And I didn't know. I think, am I masculine at my core? And then David Dieda had a set of sort of questions you can use to diagnose yourself. Because he said, whether you're a man or a woman, you'll either be masculine at your core deep down, or feminine at your core deep down, or maybe you're 50-50. This is based on his experience of working with thousands of couples and individuals, gay and straight. All this applies very much to gay and straight couples as well, right? And in fact, gay and straight couples are often more aware of the masculine feminine dynamic than straight couples are, right? They've kind of got more. That's why you see the kind of butch and femme in the lesbian community. You'll see like this lipstick lesbian, really glossy, and then some kind of biker chick, and you're like, what? It's like because it doesn't.
But actually, it makes total sense.
It makes total sense. Yeah, it doesn't fit because it's not how I would. So I'm thinking she's really pretty, therefore she could get a really pretty feminine girl. But it's like, no, but it's not. That's not what she's looking for.
What you mean, like the pornos, where everyone's really pretty?
No, what I mean,
that's so many people's models, right? Like really,
Okay, yeah. Well, the model I'm referring to in my head is that a gorgeous woman would get an attractive guy, but of course, I wouldn't find the guy attractive. She's looking for if she's a feminine woman, she's looking for masculine. So if she's looking for a masculine guy, obviously you see gorgeous women with ugly guys. It's not about his looks, it's about his masculinity, right? And so that woman may be very masculine as well. So anyway, and gay couples, they tend to understand it more from what I get, right? Although I'm not in those communities directly. So basically, David said there's some questions you can ask yourself to see whether you're masculine, feminine, or balanced in your core, truly deep down. And the questions are things like they said, when I think about sex, when I think about sexual partners, what turns me on the most? What turns me on the most? Is it my partner being stronger than me? The idea of my partner being stronger than me and able to overpower me physically? Or is it the idea of my partner being weaker than me and me able to overpower them physically? Or do both turn me on equally? Right? Or is it the idea of us being equal strength, maybe? And it may be that, both, maybe all turn you on in different ways, but where's the emphasis for you? Which one is more? Or if you were going to have a situation in a sexual situation where, you know, one partner was going to tie up the other, would you rather be the one being tied up or the one doing the tying up, for example? And again, you can do both at different times, right? But which one would turn you on more as be your dominant?
Yeah, if you had the other one and it was all the time, how would that work? Not like for me, if I could always overpower my guy, I'd just be like, ick. It's all the time, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And so we've got this series of questions, and then there was also about, you know, if there's a cockroach or a spider or something that needs killing, do you want the other person to do it, or are you really happy to do it? Or again, 50-50. There's these little clues, right? Little ways of now. Even when I asked those questions of myself, I was so bloody confused with my feminized upbringing, and perhaps feminist, that I wasn't even sure then. Which just seems utterly bizarre to me now, but I wasn't even sure. And I was like, oh my God, is it? I don't know. And then he said the following thing, because the book I was reading was written for men, right? And he said,
was that the warrior? What's the book called?
The Way of the Superior Man. The Way of the Superior Man.
Yeah, that was it. The Way of the Superior Man. And I'd say that was a bloody good read as a woman as well.
Every woman I've shown that book to goes, oh my God, this is so true. And they all go, oh my God, this is so true. Right? Every woman, because I used to, anyway.
Well, no, I think it's just important. So if you are listening to this and you're a woman and you're like, The Way of the Superior Man, that's the sound I put for me. Like, read that damn book.
David Dieda has another book written about the same time called It's a Guy Thing, an ownership manual. I haven't read that, but it's a guy thing. Ownership manual.
I didn't find it as good actually. It was okay, but actually The Way of the Superior Man, I was like, nailed it. And reading it from it was just interesting reading a book that's actually written for men. Like, oh, that's how they think. Oh, that makes sense. Oh, yes, I do that. It was a real insight, but to both masculine and feminine. But very powerful book.
Yeah, absolutely. And then he in the introduction he said the following thing. He said, if you are masculine, if your sexual essence, he uses your core sexual essence is masculine, then you will feel attracted to women multiple times a day. He said, from middle-aged mothers to teenage girls, if this was the phrase he used, if she shines the light, you will feel the pull. And I went, that is me. That I definitely get. I can relate to that. And once I got that bit, I could then look back at the other and I go, oh, okay, yes. So this is me. I have a masculine core because that's true for me. And then I looked back and went, oh yeah. And and all the other things started to make sense. And that was the turning point for me. But it took that. I was that bad, if you like, that kind of out of touch of myself, that it took that to actually have me, the light bulbs, go on.
Well, and I would say I experienced the same thing. Leaving home at 15, starting working in kitchens, which is a very masculine environment, at 14, and doing that for 17 years. I've been surrounded by men in the workplace. I mean, when Amy and I worked for Raymond Blanc, there were 45 chefs. There were three women in that kitchen. It's unusual.
I'm sure they were all very sort of polite in their language and respectful in the way they spoke about things in that room.
We got to get how men get treated, and there was a level to which it was really interesting. Actually, there's a level to which in the beginning they didn't know how to be with us. Right. So there was a lot of testing, and there was a certain amount of trying to help us as women. But then there's also this world of, if you're going to get on in a kitchen, and I'm not talking, this is professional, hard, high-level kitchens. There's a bit, probably similarities to the Army, the Navy, the Air Force. Like, if you're going to be in a hierarchical situation with real deadlines, and no one's going to die, right? But you've got customers going, they want their food. There's no room for being feminine. There's no room for please and thank you. There's no room for chit-chat. It's like, get that shit done or get out the way. So it was really interesting because at first, when a woman comes into the kitchen, the guys are kind of they're like, oh, they're a woman. So they're kind of trying to treat us like women. But then once we're bedded in, we're just one of the guys, right? And they see us as one of the guys, and they're not, we almost become non-sexual. I think that's the distinction. When we first come in the kitchen, it's like, oh, it's a girl. That's attractive. But actually, for us all to do our jobs, we have to not have that in the space. So, and that's what I spent a lot of time in. So if you'd have asked me this again, a bit like you, a long time ago, I'd have gone, masculine, absolutely. And that was actually that's what was, because I was taking that home to my relationships.
Right. Exactly what I wanted to come on to. So it's nothing. Oh, hang on a minute. My light's gone
So
off.
you just went into the dark. For those who are listening, Kev's light just went off. It's cast into dark.
It must be the bulb because the actual light on it is still on. So
we can still see you.
You can still see it. If I lean forward, then it makes up for it. Yeah. Okay. So everyone's got masculine and feminine in them, and everyone's going to use that. Like you've just described an environment where, of course, you had to animate, express your masculine traits because that's what the environment required. But the problem was you brought it home into your intimate relationships, which is why a big part of why those things
didn't go very well.
Didn't work out so well, right?
Which is why I'm divorced, and now we're married. But right.
Yeah, exactly. And similarly, I was not, I was all over the place. My relationships didn't work partly because of that reason. Now, my wife, for example, is a doctor. So when she's been in medical situations as a general practitioner doing, and business owner as she was when I met her. Yeah, she's got to make financial decisions. She's got to deal with, drug addicts trying it on, heroin addicts trying to con her, and she's got to deal with life and death situations sometimes. It's very rare in general practice, but does happen occasionally. And she had to deal with that in hospitals before. Of course, she had quite a long hospital career before going into general practice. So in that situation, she's making decisions. She's organised. She's boom, 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 big time. But she doesn't. The difference is and that's what she was like in her previous marriages. Actually, that's certainly what she was like in her second one, which was a longer one, right? And they lived together and everything. She was the one making the decisions. She was the one initiating things physically, even, right? But she's not like that with me. She's not like that with me. And when she first met me, she was like, we met on the internet, we met online, but before the age of swiping, thank God. But we met online, and then when we first met for a coffee, like she heard my voice, she was like, this isn't going to work. It's not going to be like this with this guy. She got immediately, she had one of her first thoughts, right? Because I wouldn't, it wouldn't work. She wouldn't, it's like, by me being in my masculine, it drove her into her feminine. I provide the space for her to be more feminine, because that polarization also works in a positive way. The more masculine I am, the more feminine she feels free to be, and naturally and relaxed and comfortable. She can surrender and let go, which is the feminine core theme, surrender and let go. And the more she surrenders and let go, the more I become masculine. So it actually polarizes in a really good way. And so, but at work, she only works one day. Obviously, she's on maternity leave now, but she's gone down to 1 day a week, right? Because because work was so exhausting and draining for her, and that's what I wanted her to be able to do. But at work, of course, she's still got to be in her masculine energy, but she doesn't bring that home anymore. That's the difference, right? So similarly, a house husband, if a guy stays at home looking after the kids all day, he may be in his feminine, nurturing in the moment with the children, and that's fine. But if he then carries on like that and brings that into his intimate relationship with his woman, again, it's a problem. So she can be the high-powered lawyer, arguing, fighting, killing people in the courtroom, whatever. He could be the stay-at-home husband, and it can work. But they've got to, unless that their core, she's masculine core and he's genuinely feminine core, that might happen. But what they've got to be able to do is, when it comes to their intimacy and their intimate relationship, they've got to have it so that he's in the masculine, she's in the feminine, or it won't work. It won't last. They won't be fulfilled in it.
And there's a whole world there, isn't there, about once we all know ourselves and we deal with our childhoods and we know who we are at our core and we understand that dynamic, we can actually do that. It's like, for me, I'm still in a relatively, would I put coaching in a masculine role? It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's kind of both, because there's a lot of talking, there's a lot of feeling out feelings, intuition, all of that. But ultimately, I'm running a business. I've got clients. I've got to be on time. I've got to finish on time. We're doing this podcast, all of that world. And there's sometimes to switch off, I need to go out with the dog. If I've just finished a workshop and then in come the kids and Owen comes home from work, I can't. My brain is literally going, the two worlds colliding immediately that. It's literally a head fuck for me. And I'm like, I actually can't. I need to go out with the dog and just, come down, if you like. Being in my masculine now that I'm really aware of it, it's hard. It's a difficult place to be. It's tiring. And to then flip like that is really difficult. And I don't know, I guess it's the same for guys. If there's a level to which we've got to understand it, but also give ourselves time to transition. And the fact that we're all in the workplace, and the workplace is generally predominantly masculine, unless it's been created all feminine, which you've even told me about an article before about a company that was all run by women, and then didn't the woman CEO just go, that was a disaster, I'm never doing it again, because it was too. And I've had coaching groups that are all women, and I'm like, Jesus, ladies, we need to focus. Like, we got stuff to do. We've got a deadline. We've got to stop chatting. And my groups, I specifically put men and women together for that reason. That it's all men. It's all a bit too bum, 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 bum. But if it's all women, it's like, oh, yay, let's have some coffee. And I'll get enrolled in that. Like, we're never going to buy a property like that.
We'll have a really nice time, but we won't actually move forward. We won't achieve anything. There'll be no goals. No goals will be achieved.
Food, the coffee will be hot. It'll all be delightful. We'll get nothing done. Yeah. Really, it takes something. And this was what I'm thinking back to one specific group. They were all very feminine women, right? So if it had been me and a couple of other people with a similar ability to be masculine, fine, no issue. In fact, Vicky and I, as joint venture partners, no problem. Like, boom, 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 when we've got to get stuff done. And sometimes we'll talk for a few hours about how frilly the hotel that we want to buy is going to look and get nothing done other than picking colours. Total stereotypes. And not putting anything wrong in that. I think that's the key, isn't it? And that's okay. Like, that's what makes it fun. That's why we need both.
Of course. And so, when you label one better than the other, that's where so many problems come in, right?
That's where it's going wrong.
Yeah, and that's so dominant. So, for example, in the UK right now, literally last week, I saw a headline that the Conservative government, the right of centre government, had announced they wanted to make it so that 50% of their members of Parliament are women. So they want to have this arbitrary target of 50% of Parliament. Now, that all sounds great in a way, because it's fair, it's fair, it's representative, and they're representing the people they serve and all that kind of stuff. Until you understand that when it comes to political parties, twice as many men join political parties as women. So the ratio of men to women in political parties is 2 to 1, 67% approximately. Across the political spectrum, men tend to get more involved in politics. And actually, if you look at tribal societies, so if you look about how humans have lived forever, that's also true. Men, every tribal society ever studied, men are more involved in political leadership than women. Which isn't right. Doesn't mean it's good or bad or right or wrong. It kind of makes sense though, because they're more masculine, so they're more goal orientated, more strategic, more, and they're also not having to deal with, being pregnant and breastfeeding and all the hormonal stuff and all that kind of stuff. So it kind of makes sense. That's the way it is, right, in those societies. And so 2/3 of the members of political parties are men. So how are you going to have this fifth? And also, obviously, all the MPs come from members of the political parties. So why should it be 50-50? That doesn't make sense. You're going to artificially force it to be 50-50. And that's not a meritocracy. That's not about having the best people for the job. That's just about, quotas and, well, you're not as good. We don't think you're as good at this job, but because of your sex, we're going to give you the job anyway. And we think you're actually better at this job, but because you're of your sex, we're not going to give it to you. It's not a huge number of jobs, right? It's Parliament, but that's the message it gives out. The message it gives to my 19-year-old daughter is that she should get, there should be 50-50 women in every walk of life. And
if I think of that in kitchens, I mean, it's and also I didn't want to stay in kitchens. It's the most ridiculous environment. 16 hours a day, barely sit down. I used to live on coffee and cigarettes and Mars bars. I don't want to stay there. I love it when Jordan Peterson talks about lawyers in America and Canada, and he says, ask not why the women are leaving, ask why the men are staying. Because the women are like, this is nuts. Yeah. Why am I doing this? This is not living. This is like hard, stressful. I'm going to go and do something else. So actually making us
yeah, it's mad. Like, why 50%? It's an arbitrary. It's like a 5-year-old's perception of fairness. Oh, but if we have half, that's fair. You have half the cake, I have half the cake. It's like grow up, be a bit more nuanced to how you're thinking about things, right? But then, of course, because in certain roles like those high-powered corporate lawyers in the City of London who are working 80, 90, 100 hours a week, killing it. They're making a lot of money, right? And
they're
then
not doing well anywhere else.
Hang on. But they're making more money per hour. They're making more money per hour than someone who's a lawyer who's working 40 hours a week. It's not just they're making more money; they're making more money per hour. So it can occur then. Oh, the women are getting the poorly paid jobs, the men are getting paid more, and so you get a gender pay gap. But the gender pay gap, so this again, conservative government, not the bloody Labour Party, conservative government brought in legislation a few years ago that every company of a certain size has to report its gender pay gap. And so, guess what? The airlines, EasyJet, have a very large gender pay gap because 90% of the pilots are men and 90% of the cabin crew are women. Guess what? Pilots make more than cabin crew. Oh, they've got a gender pay gap. Must be sexism. It's like, no, people are different. And women, as you say, like you said about Jordan Peterson, the women are prioritizing making different choices. They're making different choices than the men are making. They have different strengths. They make different choices. Even in medicine, my wife's a doctor. I went to medical school before I quit halfway through. I got a degree and I quit, but I originally went to medical school. 120 years ago, there were no female doctors in the UK. There were none trained. Maybe even 100 years ago, about 110, they started training some women. So there were no women doctors coming through in the UK. When I went to medical school, it was about 50-50. Now I believe it's about 60-40. There's more women than men in medical training. So there's more female. You can't go, oh, well, it's, women aren't encouraged to do science at school or whatever. That's like, you want to be a doctor, you've got to do science, right? It's like, it's core to it. So the girls are doing well. They're going to medical school. They're getting in, the kind of sexist, patriarchal, blah, 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 whatever you want to call it. Women are coming in. And so, we have a majority of female doctors now, new doctors. But of course, some of those female doctors decide to go part-time, like my wife. A higher percentage of them go part-time. A higher percentage of them will choose the lower paying and easier and less demanding specialities. So even if we look at America in medicine, where it's obviously much more of a sort of commercial business type thing over there, and the pay discrepancies are greater because it's not controlled by the government, the women go into the lower paying specialities because they're more family friendly. They're more work-life balance friendly. The women are more able to, it's because their sexist husbands make them look after the kids, therefore they can't have a career. Well, that's one way of looking at it. But no, it's actually their choices they're making, right?
I like looking after my kids.
Indeed. Yeah. Some women are no, but you're the wrong kind of feminist. You're allowed to make your own choices as long as they're the choices I want you to make. Now, so there's this gender pay gap where for per hour, every dollar a woman makes like 72 cents per hour, right? And that's true both sides of the Atlantic about that figure, right? Most of the developed world. But it's because they're choosing different jobs. They're not choosing to be the corporate lawyer working weekends and staying up all night and doing something. They're making different choices. And now some people then, what they've done is call that, that's the motherhood penalty. We're going to call that the motherhood penalty.
Oh my God, I've not heard of that one.
because up until the age of 30, women make more than men, actually.
Yeah.
Up to 30, women more.
True, right?
So that must be sexism or something. I don't know. Anyway, up to the age of 30, women make more than men. But
you can't say that as a man, Kevin. You can't call it sexism when women are earning more than men. You're not allowed.
That's right.
The irony.
Anyway, and I think actually even women who never have children in their 40s and 50s are still making more than men as well, right?
Yeah.
They never have children. So it is about having children. But to call that the motherhood penalty, so my wife's gone down to 1 day a week and now she's got a year's paternity leave. So obviously you take breaks in your career, you have time off, you have less seniority, less experience. Your expertise is reduced compared to somebody who's been working full time for 5 years. Obviously, you're going to not go back into the workplace with 5 years promotion credit that he's had. Obviously it's going to be different, right? But she's not. My wife's not paying a penalty. She's having the privilege, she would call it, I'm sure, of being able to not work and look after and feed her baby and look after raise her family while her husband works. Right? How's that a bloody motherhood penalty? It's kind of nuts criteria that's been brought in. Now, Claude, there's the world expert on the gender pay gap is a woman called Professor Claudia Goldin. I think she's at Harvard. She's in one of the Ivy League universities, anyway. And she says, actually, about $1.72, 2 cents of it is to do with sexism and discrimination. 2 cents of it is to do with sex. Obviously, that happens. Obviously, everyone's got anecdotal stories of men, people being treated differently. Obviously, that shit happens, right? But it's 2 cents. The other bit, she said, is about choices and all the different things we've been talking about. And last time I checked, Claudia is also a woman, by the way. Now, what she would also then say, there are things that you could do where you could, this idea that part-time work pays less per hour than full-time work, is that a good thing, right? So she quotes the example of pharmacists, so dispensing pharmacists, right? That industry has set it up now so that whether you work full-time or part-time, you make the same per hour. And so therefore the gender pay gap within pharmacy doesn't really exist. So there may be other areas where so that's kind of like what you're kind of also almost doing, sort of feminizing the workplace a little bit. You're kind of tailoring it to help women. And that may have a place in some areas. But you're never going to get the corporate lawyers to agree to that. So you're never going to go into the City of London where they're doing, billion-dollar company mergers and say, well, actually, Tracy, who comes in on just Monday and Tuesday, can you pay her the same amount per hour as the guy who's here slaving it out 7 days a week and staying up all night over the weekend to get the deal over the line? They would just tell you to fuck off and not be an idiot. Right?
Well, because she's not going to be able to get the deal over the line because an email that comes in on Wednesday morning isn't going to get answered till Monday morning, and that's the deal blown up. So
yeah. So it's like if your criteria, as you said earlier, is equality of outcome, that women must, for every pound a man makes, a woman must make the same. Otherwise, there's something unfair or oppressive or sexist. Then, of course, if you think like that, you're gonna feel. Well, you're probably thinking that because you have a wounded relationship with masculine and feminine, and it's perpetuating that way of thinking because you're hanging out in that whole mindset of it's all unfair and it's all oppression or it's all somehow wrong, and you're fueling anger for yourself. And it's mad. Now, my daughter's 19, and obviously you know my daughter, right? But we come to parenting. Like parenting, we talked about how mothers and fathers different parenting, and we could talk about what about raising boys and girls. And that was something that was flagged up on your socials. Or on my socials, is it different to raise boys and girls? And obviously, it's different. And obviously, it doesn't mean we should limit our children. So I'm totally in favour of giving girls the option to play with blue tractors and trucks and stuff like that. I'm totally in favour with giving boys the opportunity to play with pink dollies. But give them both and then let them do what they want. And then what you'll find is that the girls in general will very much gravitate towards the pink dollies, and the boys in general will very much gravitate towards the blue trucks, right? But some may not. They may do that, which is absolutely fine, of course, right? But there are some, these are obviously extreme outliers. There are some parents who are like trying to push their kid. Oh, I'm working really hard to make my child be gender neutral and make it play with 50-50. And then they get upset when 3 or 4 years old. That boy really does want to play with the tractors and the girl really does want to play with the dollies, and the parents are upset. It's like, why are you projecting all this stuff onto your children? Just let them be. So I think it's great to give them opportunities. And raising my daughter, I was very much letting her know that she could be strong, she could be independent, and those sorts of things, like facilitating that in her as a young girl, 6, 7, 8, not having to think you've got to be a certain way, right? But also listening to her and letting her be herself, like being led by the child. And then what I also started saying to her when I explained the because she asked me about the age of 10. We drove home one day, we were sitting, because I remember we were sitting in the car outside the house, and she said, why did people used to think that women couldn't do some jobs or something like that? And obviously stuff at school, about you couldn't be female doctors back in the day or whatever. And I said, well, that's a very good question. I said, because, some people thought that men had to be in charge of everything, and that wasn't good, and that's the phase one, like David Day talks about. And I said, and now, I said, it's really interesting because now, I said, some people actually have gone like a bit far the other way. And some people actually think that men and women are the same. And she, when young kids feel like either disgusted or kind of like they strongly disagree with something, and it's a full body, visceral, like what? And their facial expression, their whole body contorts. They're like, and she pulled this face of like, these people are fucking mental. What idiot? That was the face. And I remember seeing that. She's like, what? Because obviously when you're, 8 or 9, you're obviously the boys and the girls, they do not hang out with each other in the school playground.
They
right?
think each other are gross. Girls
Yeah.
think boys are gross, and boys like it to the girls. And
Absolutely, right? So I said, and that's a bit crazy, isn't it? I said, but some adults really think like that. I said, and I think that boys and girls are different, but actually boys are good and girls are good. It's great, they're both great, but sometimes they're different, but they can do some of the same things, so they might choose to do differently. So I've got all this in there. She was like, oh yeah, okay, obviously. And then as she went through her senior school, her teenage years, I also said the following thing to her. I said, look, Imogen, I said, one of the things that's worth bearing in mind. Oh no, actually another step. I remember when she was 13. That's right, 13. I dropped the following sentence into the conversation. I said that something about girls are better at understanding, women are better at understanding emotions and using words and conversations than men in general. And she went, is that true? Is that true? She was like, well, hang on a minute, this is 13. I said, well, let me ask you a question, Imogen. I said, at lunchtime, at lunch break at school, what do the boys do? And she said, play football. I said, yeah, okay. I said, what do the girls do? And she went, talk. I said, yeah. I said, the girls sit around and talk, don't they? I said, so actually, that is the boys and girls choosing to do different things. I said, and what do the girls talk about? They talk about who said what to who and what that means and who's friends with who and who's fallen out with such and such and, the sort of friendship dynamic dramas and all that kind of, or maybe who fancies who or whatever as well. I said, so the girls and the boys have different preferences. The boys prefer to do sport in general and the girls prefer to sit around and talk in general about relationships and human interactions. So they've got that preference ready. And then the boys spend 5 years practicing their football, so they get better and better at that kind of stuff. And the girls spend 5 years practicing sitting around talking about relationships and emotions and friendships, so they get better and better at that stuff. So it gets even more strong over time. And she went, oh yeah, okay. And she got it, and that was fine because she's 13. And then what I then said to her afterwards, I said later on, I say one of the things about school, Imogen, is to be aware of is that the school has to treat the boys and girls the same. The school has to treat the boys and girls the same. It cannot say, do you know what, girls? Some of you may not want a career. You might prefer to get married and have lots of babies. Like, school's just not allowed to say that. And even me saying that now, some people might be listening to this going, oh, you can't say that to a child, right? Bear with me, the story hasn't finished yet. School's not allowed to say that. And it may be that some women really, because I explained to her the masculine and feminine by this point, right? Some women really want to go out and be prime ministers or build businesses, become billionaires, millionaires, whatever it is. That's real estate developers, whatever. That's totally cool and fine. But actually, for most women, really, or for a good number of them, they'll probably decide in time at some point that inside what they really want is babies and all that kind of stuff. That'll be more important to them, probably, for most of them, right? But it's okay for either. But so the key thing is, Imogen, for you to listen to your heart and look inside and make your own choice. But the thing is, the reason I'm saying this is because I know school isn't going to even mention that. So all school is going to talk about is career. School's going to talk about doing well academically, getting exams, going to university, having that's all they're going to go because that's what school thinks is that's kind of school's thing. And they're not even allowed to mention the alternative. Now, you can do whatever combination of mixture you want. I love you regardless either way. It's absolutely fine. But my more important for you is to listen to your heart. Because what I don't want her to do is to turn around to the mid-30s and go, I've got a girl boss, career. Oh shit, I need a man and babies, TikTok. Oh shit. And you know what? I'm now 35 and I've got this money and I've got this career and I've got this house, this nice car, and I'm very empowered. And I want a man, because women like to marry across or up, they don't want to marry down. I want a man who's at least as qualified and high earning as me, ideally more. And he's probably a few years older than me, late 30s maybe. Oh, there aren't that many around actually, because I'm such a successful girl boss. And actually, the ones in their late 30s have got the pick of the women in their mid and late 20s. Oh, fuck. Right? Which is a really, really common thing that's happening in modern society, right? And I don't want her to be that. So I've given her the range of options, right? And just my job has been not to push her in a direction, but to raise her awareness of that. Now, as it happens, at the age of 19, she's in a gap year before university. She is going to start a maths degree in September, October. Maths, not exactly the most girly subject, right? It's doing a maths degree. That is STEM. That's what the M in STEM subject stands for, maths. And she's going to one of the top maths departments in the world to do that, one of the top 20 in the world. top 4 in the UK. She's been studying maths. So when she comes out of that university with that maths degree, if she wants to get a job in the corporate world, people will be, maths is like arguably the most marketable degree, along with things like economics.
Yeah.
It's like one of the most. Employers will be throwing themselves at her, right? So she wants to do that. So this is. Oh, and as you also know, she's been selling stuff on Amazon this year. Started her little Amazon resale business. She's also doing maths tutoring, and she's doing some work in retail. So. And she's
investing,
saving,
right? She's got investments already.
Exactly.
She's investing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She's saving. She's got £1,000 in the stock market because Dad has taught her about saving and investing from an early age. So it's not like I've kept her playing with pink frilly dresses and all you got to do is learn to be a mummy. Absolutely not, right? She's got whole options. But I've also talked to her about all that stuff and shown her. I hope she has a good relationship with her father. So she's got a good relationship foundation with the relationship with the masculine. So she'll be able to have a good relationship with a great guy. And, she goes in with her eyes open. So, but she's probably not, the average girl of her age is not getting that narrative from her father. And all they're getting is the school
or society or school, right?
Exactly.
That's the thing. And that's what I'm just like, oh, this is where. So what I deal with now as a mum, and what a lot of my friends deal with who have also got kids, and I'd say my kids are younger, right? So a lot of my friends had kids prior, not massively, but a few years before. I'm 42 this year. I am one of those women that it could have been too late, right?
Just sneaked under the wire.
Just there, right? And what I deal with as a mum, and I'm getting this in this conversation, which is really useful, and a lot of my mum friends do as well. And then we've also got friends who are still having kids, because Owen's 10 years younger than me, right? So actually, his friends are just starting to have kids, whereas mine are all, I'm like at the end. That 10 years makes a huge difference. And the thing that is common amongst us as women, and this is women devaluing ourselves, right? Is we don't put a value on being a mum. There's value in being, I know, but we're doing it to ourselves, right? I'm speaking as like, I do that. I'm like, so there's a real value of being a business person, because the money comes in, right? When you're a mum, holy shit, there's probably not that, and again, it's not more important than bringing money in, but it's like, if we don't take parenting seriously and have it work, the world's kind of fucked. Because if we haven't got kids, or we've got kids that don't work or are dysfunctional, what happens? And actually, we're the ones, speaking as for myself and any other women who resonate this, we're the ones that devalue what we do. We don't consider it as valuable. It's kind of like we do our business and we value that, and then it's like, oh yeah, and we're mums. And the place that I see it the most, and I hear it with clients as well, is if a mum doesn't have a career and someone says, what do you do? They say something like, oh, I'm just a mum, or they get awkward, or they don't know how to describe themselves in society. So rather than going, I'm bringing up the next generation, it's a pretty rock star place to be. The thing that we say as women is, I'm just a mum, or I'm just a stay-at-home mum, and there's this shame around it of like, oh, I don't have a career. It's like, being a mum's pretty important. And I include myself in that. It's like people go, what do you do? I talk about my coaching, being an author, all of that. Whereas actually, I'm a freaking mum to 2 boys who are going to be epic. Massive, right? And what I just got, I was like, oh, yes, I went through a school system that just asked me what I wanted to do as a job. Nobody talks about it. I'm getting quite like, oh, this is where it is. Like, no one talks about it. No one talks about being a mum as an option. Like, that's valuable. That's valid. Even in money coaching.
Oh, I've lost you.
You still there?
Oh, we glitched out. We're back, yeah.
Even in money coaching, we talk about, make sure you've got your money covered. There's a level to which, like, don't rely on anyone else, whether you're a man or a woman. Don't rely on anyone else. Make sure because there's a whole world, right, of women who have relied on a relationship and vice versa, and then it's gone wrong, and then they're like, shit, now I've got nothing for retirement. There's a whole demographic of people who've got, poverty because of relationship breakdown, all of that. And it's like, ooh, how do we get schools to talk about that? That's massive.
Well, the solution to that is to get married and stay married and have a marriage that works, because that's one of the financial foundations in life, right? Is that really helps you when you're a couple and you work together and you stay together. If my wife and I, if we'd met and got married at the age of 25 and we're still together, we'd be, financially would be, wow, in an amazing place. I mean, we're not doing bad, but my God. And the way for that is to teach people to be true to themselves and to teach them about masculine and feminine, so they understand that, because then they can have good relationships that work, rather than my wife and I did have crap ones, crap ones and get divorced and fuck it up and learn the hard way. Because then, so the answer to that isn't to say, oh, more and more strong and independent and avoid commitment, and more don't trust anybody because they're going to break your heart and let you down. Happening. Yeah, that's the dominant narrative. So, as you say, my job wasn't to indoctrinate my daughter into wanting motherhood and wifehood. My job was to counterbalance the social media and the BBC, everything. And the school wide society narrative that somehow that's of less value, and that who do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? It's all about your job. It's all about your career. Because that's not even true for men, let alone bloody women, right?
Yeah, right.
So she's 19. I would say she understands more about relationships than the average 40-year-old. So we'll see how she goes.
And when did you start? When do parents, so people listening to this who are parents, and they're going, okay, I've just realised I have this huge narrative going on that both boys and girls have to deal with. And actually, one of the podcasts that you and I want to do is about the book, The Boy Crisis, right, which talks a lot about all of that, and we'll get into that next time. It's leading on beautifully in the way that things do. But so people are listening to this and go, oh my God, I didn't realise that this was going on, and now I'm seeing that. How do they? I guess it's not about battling it. It's about, how do they bring it up?
Well, when you have an awareness of it, that's like you're 50% of the way there, right? Because then you're going to start seeing things. Oh my God! And pennies are dropping all over the place. So you can talk to your kids about the masculine and the feminine. If they're teenagers, you can talk to them about what I described. So there's masculine and feminine. Men are 80% masculine. Most men, say 80% of men are 80% masculine, 20% feminine. 80% of women are 80% feminine, 20% masculine. You can just draw a couple of little bar charts like that and talk about that. But everyone's got both, and some people are the other way around, all that kind of stuff. And the thing is to be listening to yourself, right? And when they're very young, when they're under 10 or whatever, they know boys and girls are different. I mean, when they're 3 or 4, it's not even an issue, is it, right? But when they get to a point where they start to be aware of boys and girls different, it all just happens naturally. If you are in a place in the world, and they do exist, where teachers at a very young age, activist teachers, want to talk to your kids about gender identity and how this ideology that people can choose their own gender, and you might be a boy, you might be a girl, you might be neither. If someone wants to say that to your 5 or 6-year-old kid, you need to get them out of there.
I don't think we can have this conversation today without bringing that up, right? It's like it's a big narrative going on right now.
Yeah.
And very polarizing, and I would say very destructive.
Yeah, 100%.
And so if a parent is, and I also know people who are like, oh, but what if that narrative's true? What do you say to that? So talk more about why it's destructive and why you should get the kids away from that. Because some people might be going, what? But isn't this the way society's going? Shouldn't we be able to be anything and all of that?
Yeah.
So go a bit more detail, because I'm aligned with what you've just said. I get it. But we've had a lot of conversations about it. So people who haven't, who are like, hold on, what? So what do I do with my teenager who wants to be the opposite sex?
Okay, that's a big question. So there's what we've done as a society is we've taken this vanishingly rare medical condition. It would have been previously, it was considered a psychiatric condition of gender dysphoria. Now it's just considered a medical condition, because there may be hormonal elements to it rather than psychiatric. But we've taken a medical condition that's vanishingly rare, and we, as a society, have made it a kind of the next frontier in rights. and equality and all this kind of stuff, and started to then go on and on about it. And the deep structure of that, in my view, is not some conspiracy, but it's simply that people who are activists and make activism part of their identity because they're unhappy with the status quo and perhaps wounded as kids, whatever, always need something to be changing, right? That gives them the illusion of progress. They always need something to be railing against. And the reality is that when it comes to sex-based rights, so male, female, when it comes to sexual equality, we have it in the Western world. We have sex equality, right? It's already there. All the laws that people wanted about equal pay and equal retirement ages and equal this, that, and the other, all that stuff's been in law for ages. We have it, okay, but we don't have equal outcomes. No, because men and women are different, but we have the equality of opportunity. That's established. In fact, if anything, my daughter has more opportunity than my son, I would say.
It's going, the balance is swinging the other way now, right?
Yeah, if anything, she has more opportunity. When it comes to sexuality, gay rights, gays and lesbians, we basically have that as well. So we have non-discrimination laws. We have gay marriage. Men and women can marry each other, the same sex, legally, and have exactly the same rights of pension, parenting rights. It's like everything's the same, right? So again, yes, there's still some homophobia, there's still some prejudice, of course.
Sure.
Just like there's still some, like you're never going to eradicate that. Just like you're never going to eradicate murder, right? When people say, "Oh, we want to make sure there's none of this, no sexism or no racism or no homophobia, we want to eradicate it, we want to have zero," which people do say that you'll see that narrative all the time, right? So, well, do you want to have zero murder? Because I'd like there to be zero murder, but it's going to be pretty flipping difficult to achieve that, right? We have to bend over backward, make it the number one and only goal of our society and civilization to have zero murder. That's the only way we do it. And it's like, well, there might be some unintended consequences on the way. I've put that much effort into it, right? So you can't have. There will always be murder. There will always be burglary. There will always be theft. There will always be sexism, racism, homophobia, right? But basically, when it comes to the legal structures and frameworks around sexuality, it's all done, right? So then what happens is activists in these organisations, which are like any organisation, it builds up and anything in nature wants to grow and expand. Whether it's the plant, okay, they're cut now, so they can't. Whether it's flowers and plants, whether it's human beings, whether it's you want to build a company or a non-profit organisation, everything wants to grow and expand. That's the nature of the universe, right?
Yeah.
And so it would really take something for the gay rights activists to turn around and go, actually, we've got everything we want for. Let's pack everything up, put everything in boxes, stick it in storage, and go home and find something else to do. Because there is an organisation, there is power and status, and there is money associated with those organisations. Those things are in place. There are grants, there are jobs, there's things to be head of, to feel important about. That's already there. Now, what's probably happened, and this is my sense from reading what a lot of because a lot of gay people are not happy with the way things are with the T. Yeah. A lot of the LGB are not happy with the T being tacked on the end, right? Let alone all the other stuff, right? What's happened is that a lot of the reasonable, what happens when an organisation, a radical organisation achieves its goals, is that the reasonable people do pack up and go and do something else, which just leaves the lunatic extremists behind, who then become even more powerful. So the organisation gets more and more extreme. So there's an organisation in the UK called Stonewall, which have positioned themselves as the LGBT rights organisation and have then created programs for training staff. And if you train your staff, you get accredited by Stonewall, so you can put that on your job applications. And it's like various other things that companies go for to get an accreditation. You get accreditation as being LGBT friendly. And they have infiltrated or been teaching in lots of government departments, in lots of organisations and schools. And they have this very radical agenda, which is about now the next frontier. What are we going to be upset about now? What are we going to get people to get better about now? It's the whole transgender thing. Now, obviously there's transphobia. Obviously there are people who would find somebody who was transgender and beat them up for being transgender and being horrible to them and bullying. Obviously that stuff does still happen. Probably a lot less than 30, 40 years ago, right? But it does still happen. But again, so does murder still happen, right? And so it's become this kind of cause célèbre of how we've got to liberate and protect these people. Now, here's the thing, I think it's a key thing to say. If you think that gender identity is an actual real thing, if you think that being born in the wrong body is an actual thing, and that just like with gay rights, like with gay and lesbian children, our job is to go out and find those children early and young so that they can live their truest lives and live their best lives, then you see it. It makes sense to see it as finding these kids to liberate them, so that they can know as young and as early as possible that they are trans, just like it would be good for them to know as young and early as possible that they are gay or lesbian, so that they can be okay with it and understand and know themselves better. So if you see it like that, it makes sense what they're doing. But there's two ways in which it's very, very different to that. It's not that at all. And the two ways are the following. One is that the consequences and the impacts of being gay or lesbian are basically pretty minor. So it affects who you sleep with, who you're attracted to. Wider society these days doesn't really give a monkey, doesn't care. And then, you grapple with it. And then, you may, because people change, people's sexual orientation doesn't always stay fixed. You may go through a phase of it and actually decide that you're straight after all. That can happen too. In which case, it's doable, right? Whereas when it comes to delaying puberty through hormone blockers, or it comes to obviously surgical interventions, but even social transition, when it comes to stuff like changing your gender socially, the impacts are potentially much bigger and much long lasting. And certainly if you get into medical interventions, you get into hormone, delaying puberty and stuff like that.
And irreversible damage. You've got
a lifetime of health issues. You're turning yourself into a patient for the rest of your life, and you're going to die earlier, right? But again, you're not allowed to say that, but it's just obviously the case, right? The human body is incredibly complex. If you fuck up puberty and the hormones are the foundation for how our bodies work. Ask any pregnant woman about that, right? How much impact that has. Everything's you're going to mess up so many other aspects of your physiology and biochemistry, right? So the one way it's different to sexual orientation is because the impacts and consequences of it are like, the ramifications are huge, including infertility. You'll become infertile. Also, people that have hormone blockers become unable to have orgasm.
I was just about to say, non-orgasm for women who want to transition and then change their mind. I mean, it's just that alone.
Never have an orgasm in your life, for example, right? Now, and the other way it's different is that it's not a fixed thing. So basically, sexual orientation, being gay or straight or whatever, is pretty resistant to change. So this is why gay conversion therapy is about to be outlawed in the UK, because if you take, you do that kind of horrible, classical, sort of stereotypical, sort of evangelical right-wing Christian thing of take the gays and put them in therapy to convert them to being straight, it doesn't work. They stay gay. Just like if you did it with straight people to try and convert them to being gay, it wouldn't work. Right?
It doesn't work.
It's very resistant to change. But this whole gender identity thing is not. It's the opposite. You get social contagion. You get unhappy, troubled kids, often autistic kids that are depressed, got other issues that then they get caught up in it. They go online and they go, oh, this is the silver bullet. This is the thing that's going to make everything all right. I'm reading
this is why everything's wrong.
I feel
if I do this, it'll be okay.
I'm a girl and I want to cut my hair short and wear, dungarees and big boots and everything. And
which,
play
by the way,
football.
was me, right? When I was a teenager, I was known as a tomboy.
Exactly.
I don't like frilly dresses now.
But that must be. This is the young Alex speaking now, right? Today, possibly. Oh, I see. And I'm alienated from my parents, and I'm on the verge of running away from home at 15 or whatever it was. You did that. I know. Maybe really I'm a boy deep inside. Maybe I should transition to being a man. Because I'm reading all these people on the internet telling me how that works, and it may work for them. And there's all these chat rooms, dark recesses of Reddit or whatever. And then actually the woman at school and the teachers, even in when I was 8 or 9, talk about you can choose your gender. Someone said that at school. I remember those people came in and there was that book in the library about that, because these books are in school libraries saying that stuff, right? And so actually maybe that's what I should do. I'm going to start binding up my breasts and it's illegal here in the UK for a doctor to surgically remove my breasts under the age of 18. But I can get it done when I'm 18. Actually, what if I pressure my parents? Maybe they'll take me to Florida and a doctor will do that for me in Florida when I'm 15 or 16, because it's not illegal in many states of America. And that is happening, right? So it's the silver bullet kind of, this will make all my problems go away. Now, my wife is a GP. She has people come to her and say, I want a referral to the gender dysphoria clinic, right? Gender identity clinic. I think I'm, in the wrong body, or I think I'm whatever. They've got gender dysphoria, right? And she's really great with them. They she's really good, compassionate. But she says to me, all of them have got multiple other issues. They've got multiple other issues in terms of anxiety, depression, some physiological issues. It's never just that. They've always got all this other stuff, right? So what happened is you get this population that are depressed, anxious, etc., more likely to have suicide, commit suicide, or express suicidal thoughts. And the activist who wants to liberate everybody because they're trapped and they're being oppressed says, oh, the reason they've got all this suicidal thoughts and this depression and anxiety is because society is not accepting their gender identity. It's like, no, it's the other way round, right? They've got this idea of this, they want to switch genders because it's their silver bullet to all these other problems. And that's true for, now they're only true for every single flipping one, but that's true for the large majority, which is why you see them in clusters, which is why you see, whole groups. This idea of rapid onset gender dysphoria, which when you suddenly get teenage girls that seem completely fine, because, being a teenage girl is a bit confusing and there's a lot of hormonal changes and stuff going on. Who knew that you might question your identity when you're a teenager, right? They then suddenly get groups of them, 4 or 5 in the same year at school, in the same class, and you're like, what the fuck? That's not a coincidence, right? There's social contagion going on. But if you say that, you'll be told, well, you're saying that because you're transphobe and you're trying to oppress those kids, or you're bigot, or because you hate trans people. You're like, what? It's really, really nuts, right? So you've got to, I think, teaching your kids about, so the way to protect your children from this, the fundamental is, if you've got a man who's comfortable and is masculine as a father, and a woman who's comfortable as a feminine as a mother, and they are together and happy together and a good relationship, and that is going to be the big sort of model that's going to help the child for a start, right? That's the ideal thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, not everybody has that, right? I didn't have that as a kid, right? And neither did you. And then you can have conversations with them, age appropriately as they get to it. But what you don't want is school and other organisations getting in there and getting in their head. Now, my daughter's, because she's 19, this didn't really kick in. She was about 10 or 11, right? And I remember thinking, God, this stuff is going on. It's everywhere. I've got to get in there into her head and talk to her about it first, because someone else, she's going to hear it from somewhere, and I don't want her to hear all this bullshit. I've got to get in there and basically inoculate her against thinking like this. And I thought, okay, how can I do that? And so one day we were sitting at the dinner table. I said, God, because she already knew, because of what we said about, some people think men and women are the same. And I had another conversation with her about money, about how, do you know what, Imogen? Some grown-ups think that money is bad. Isn't that crazy? Some grown-ups think that if you make money, if you buy things and then sell them and make money, then that's like a bad thing to do. Some grown-ups are really stupid and silly. And she'd be like, and laugh along. I think that was it. Because I knew, even at the age of 6 or 7, that she was going to hear people having negative money beliefs around her and slagging off rich people. So I wanted to get in there first, right? So this pattern of the idea that some adults are cuckoo was in her head, right? And so at the age of 10, we were sitting at the dinner table, and I did the same thing. I said, do you know what, Imogen? There's this really funny thing going on. Some people are really weird, aren't they, right? Some boys think that really they're girls, and some girls think that really they're boys. They think they want to be the opposite. And I went on like that and made a joke of it. And of course, she was like, again, this sort of thought, like, what? This is mad, right? Ha ha ha. And so laugh about it and see it's ridiculous. Now, that hasn't turned her into a transphobe, right? When she sees, a couple of, in the town that I live, there's someone who works in the supermarket as a trans woman. There was a trans woman who worked on the selling tickets at the train station. My daughter would buy tickets off every day. And I saw someone yesterday actually in the petrol station. I think it's maybe a young trans woman, new one. So, my daughter encounters these people, and we're not slagging them off or complaining about them or putting them down or hating them or calling them blokes or anything like that, right? We're accepting of them. And she is still. But I need to get in there so that she wouldn't have some kind of crisis of like, oh my God, what am I? Am I because I didn't want that in her head as a teenager. So those are the kinds of things you need to be doing. And if they are 14 or 15 and they've got into that stuff, you need to take away all their devices and get them the fuck away from those influences. You need to go hardcore, right? So there's a woman, again, American woman. It's worse in America because there's more extreme there's more interventions, medical interventions for children in America. It's much more going on. And America's more polarized about everything political, but it seems to be, right? And there's this woman who was in Nevada. She was in Las Vegas, and she had this with her teenage daughter, and she saw this happening, and she basically took away all her devices at the age of 15. And what she noticed, when they spent the school holidays with family, like her family of origin, away from her sweet, happy daughter, started to return. So she thought, fuck it. So she uprooted her from Vegas, moved to, I don't know, Texas, wherever it was, where her family were, and basically just lived next to with her the grandparents and uncles and aunties and all that kind of stuff, and took away all her internet access. And obviously, and the kid resisted it. She didn't want to go, but they had like a 2-day drive. Benefits of America, right? They had a 2-day drive to get there with their stuff. And during that chat, during that call, they spoke a lot, and they played their music and they sang and they talked. And she kind of came around to it. Kids are flexible, adaptable. And now it's all in the past, right? Now she tweets about it and talks about it, and she's she's quite motivated to help other parents avoid that situation and handle it. And of course, she gets a lot of hate as well, regardless.
Huge, imagine. And what about, so the counter to that would be, but what if my child? Because I can't remember the statistic. There's a lady who's written a book about this very subject, an American author. I'll find it and we'll put it in the comments, about the actual statistics of people who would genuinely have this as an issue. And then there's the statistics now of, groups of teenagers who suddenly decide they're in the wrong gender, and the difference between the two. And she got an enormous amount of hate for this book, right? Because she's actually saying something's going on here and it's not biological. There is something else. And she was actually relating it to self-harm. So when I was a teenager, the thing was self-harm, and that this is a version of that where, groups of teenagers get into this thing, they're not really happy there's stuff going on. But what about the parents of that tiny percentage of the person who actually does have gender dysphoria and is dealing with that?
Yeah, so then
going, but what if my kid's the one? What if my kid actually has it, but I'm now trying to say it's not a thing?
So you need to find medical and psychotherapeutic support that isn't ideologically captured.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. So you need to find medical and psychological support. And there are therapists and there are doctors who can help with this, who are not ideologically driven. Because obviously this is a condition that's existed in all cultures historically around the world. It's not like
documented.
It's documented, yes. So obviously it's like it does happen, right? And we don't want to. Sure. And those people do tend to get, outcast from society and all that kind of stuff, but not in all cultures. And I don't want us to be like that. But you need to get them some support, because so basically gender dysphoria is feeling uncomfortable with the sexual you are and thinking that you feel you should be the other in some way. And often what it's based on is kind of stereotype. So you can be being a tomboy, not fitting into the traditional female stereotype, doesn't mean that you need to. You're a trans man,
or it didn't, but these days it may well do, right?
And that's why that's why a lot of lesbians are really pissed off with this, because they're saying, I was a tomboy, I'm a butch lesbian. Fuck off telling me that I should have become a man, right? And that's what would happen to me in today's culture. So they're really, they're very upset about it, and understandably so. But you need to find medical and psychotherapeutic support that is not ideologically captured. And that's the challenge, because what tends to happen, even within professional fields, is the people who are activists and have a real passion, agenda, ideological viewpoint are the ones that tend to get most involved in providing those services.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge. So, gender affirming care is, I believe, even the standard for most psychotherapists. So basically, if a teenager comes to you and says, a 15-year-old says, I think I'm the opposite sex, the therapist is basically supposed to agree with them, which, is a scandal, really. And I'm sure in 20 years, we look back upon as a terrible scandal. All those people.
Well, and there's already stuff coming out now, right, from America, because they're further ahead of us, where people who thought they were and started to transition as a teenager going, I wish I hadn't. Yeah. I'm damaged for life.
Why did you let
physically
me?
Damaged for life.
Yeah.
I can't go back. I can't orgasm. That's where all that stuff's coming out from, right? Because there are already people who are going, oh my God, why did adults around me let this happen?
Yeah, so there's going to be class action lawsuits. You know, America's like there will be a reckoning, and it's starting to come because detransitioners are a thing, and people don't, you know, and some. I mean, obviously, if you transition and medically transition, you're pretty flipping committed, right? Like, so it takes a hell of a lot to then go, actually, I was wrong. I want to go back, or I want to detransition. So there'll be people who probably do want to detransition, but they're so committed they can't admit that to themselves. So they'll be, you know, probably among the angriest ones. But yeah, so you need to find psychotherapeutic and medical support, which is not ideological. And even the famous Tavistock clinic in London, which is the biggest clinic in the UK, I think there's 3 clinics in the UK now, has been, you know, had problems and there's been ideological capture of it. There's also a doctor, I'm not even going to name him, who is a pediatrician in America, who I see him on Twitter, and you know, he's written books all about, and it's all, you know, he's fully ideologically captured, and he's a doctor, so he understands the biology. You can't go, we're an idiot, you don't understand hormones, you don't understand biology, because he sort of does, right? Because he's not, but he you know, he's full on this kind of liberating people from their, you know, the transphobic world, and they're being trapped in the wrong body, that sort of thing. Now, and you even get, when Florida recently brought in a law in America saying it's illegal now in schools in Florida to talk to children at school about gender identity or about sexual orientation, and I think it's something like below the age of 8. Right, so up to the age of 8 or 7, 8, 9, I can't remember exactly, something like that. You're not allowed at school to talk to kids about that, and you might think, well, who the fuck wants to do that? That's not a very radical law, right? That is not a very, that's the age of 8, but that's one state out of 50 that's done that up to the age of like 8 or something, and there's been a huge outcry. It's called they've named it the Don't Say Gay bill and all this kind of stuff. And then there's I think it's the Secretary of State for Housing or Education. One of them in America is a gay guy, and not him, but his partner, his husband, has gone, This is hatred. This will kill trans children. This will kill children. And it's like this, the kind of the level of intensity of like melodramatic. It's like, no, this law is to protect kids. Just fucking leave the kids alone for at least like 8, right? And it's like, no, you're killing children. It's like, what? No. So both sides think they're protecting children. So it's, you know, oh my god, you know, obviously it's so polarized. So, but so the way to think of it, in my view, is this: gender dysphoria is feeling out of, you know, a disconnect, a conflict between my biological sex and the sex I want to be. Now, you can resolve that in 2 ways. One way is by transitioning. And for some people, that would be a valid way of doing it. I think for some people, that might be the best way to do it. And some people do that. And there are trans men, trans women who I follow, who talk about this stuff, who have transitioned, but they also call out all the insanity. Like, they would agree with basically everything I've said, but they have transitioned because for them, they said it was the best way. But it may not be the best way for many people. So the other way, rather than transitioning, is to come to be at peace with the sex you were born. So to actually think, to actually get to a place where I'm okay with being a man, or I'm okay with being a woman. Now, obviously, if you can go that option, that's kind of the easier, lower risk option than transitioning and having hormones and surgery and God knows what, right? Or even it's like that like there's 2 options. They can both work, because then your biological sex, your sex, your sex and your gender identity and your sense of self will match up with your social presentation. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, because also your biological sex won't change, right? Your gender identity will match up with your social presentation, and you may find peace. That could be by transitioning or not transitioning, and obviously one of those is bloody way easier than the other, right? And as part of your health consequences, etc. But even entertaining that conversation, you know, you're cutting out a lot of the professionals who should be there to help you. So you've got to be really careful about who you get involved, I think.
Yeah, and that, you know, that in itself is really good advice, right? And even not in that instance, it's like in the coaching therapy arena, we know our industry is no different to any other. When I was a chef, guess what? There were really good restaurants and there were really bad restaurants where they didn't get good food. I mean, it's kind of, we're all human, right? There's going to be that level to which it's not all equal. Just because someone's a doctor or a therapist or a coach doesn't automatically give us this, like, so we know what we're doing, or we're right or we're wrong. I mean, it's interesting when you're talking about it, because I'm thinking, God, if a client comes to me and I think about it in money terms, and they're like, I believe this about money. First question, I'm like, well, is that true? So it's kind of no different. It's like if someone comes, I believe I'm actually this gender. Well, let's have a look. Is that true? But it's like in this forum, you're not allowed to challenge or question whether it's actually true or whether there's something else going on. But when I coach about relationships or money or joint venturing or doing a property deal, we have a look and go, is that really the best thing? Is that the workable thing? Is there something else going on? Why are we going after that deal? Why is money happening this way? What's underlying? And yet in this arena, it's kind of like we've been banned from asking that question. I mean, there may even be people who watch this or listen to us, or God forbid they listen to a soundbite and don't listen to the whole conversation and go, that Alex Louise and that Kevin Burch, oh my God, they're, whatever names they're going to call us. It's like,
well, that's the so many well-meaning people, well-intentioned people think that by, say, joining up the Stonewall training and ticking we want to be inclusive and diverse. And my wife's in hospital for 3 weeks for the pregnancy, so I was going every day, and there are rainbow-coloured zebra crossings in the hospital. Not rainbow flag as in gay rights, but the rainbow flag as in gay and transgender colours. So they've got like different colours for trans. I don't even know what the different colours mean, right? Because they're all different. Apparently being queer is not the same as, it's different to all this other stuff, and it's like, it's kind of a bit crazy, right? And it just goes so far. But of course, they'll have thought, oh well, it's good, we want to be, the diversity inclusion officer at the hospital thought, well, this is a good, who's obviously drunk the Kool-Aid big time, right? Will be advocating it, and of course, everyone on the management board will want to seem to be nice people who don't want to be horrible to anybody or exclude anybody or make people feel bad. So we'll do it. But then what it does, it sends the message that this stuff is real rather than an issue which can be resolved maybe by position, but often by other ways. And certainly you don't want to be bloody encouraging and celebrating and promoting it to vulnerable kids, which is what is happening. So, and
coming at a time when also kids are dealing with all the social media stuff, which we didn't have to deal with. So it's like a double whammy of, you can be anything you want to be, and here's social media showing a really fucked up, distorted view of most things in life, whichever, we could pick anything, couldn't we? And go on social media and find an extreme version of it. So we're taking these kids' brains who aren't fully developed. They're not able to think in a way that they will be able to when they're older, and we're going, here, deal with all this stuff as well.
Yeah, I think we've got to remember that they're children and you're the adult, right? And that some people seem to have forgotten that most basic fact. There's a morning show here in the UK with Holly Willoughby and Philip Schofield this morning, whatever, the main morning TV show, Chat Magazine, sit around and talk about, the kind of thing, right? We've all seen it. And they had a guy on recently who, with his daughter, or I can't remember if it was son or I don't know, with his child who was like 3 or 4, and it was all about, the kid was transgender and they transitioned the kid socially. They changed all the haircuts and the clothes and the name and all that stuff. And the kid had told them, I think, when the child was 2. And the guy was like a pretty, rough and ready, regular guy. And he said, I didn't understand. He said, I thought it was all mad. I didn't get it. I thought it was all nonsense. But then my own child, I think it was, anyway, whatever. My own daughter came and said it. And I had to listen. And I thought, and now I've learned so much and I've educated myself. And now, and it was kind of like, and I was like, no, buddy, you just gave up and you just got lost and overwhelmed and listened to nonsense. And hopefully your kid will grow out of it. But it started very, very early. So they're going to grow up with some challenges. But it was like, this is like mainstream TV on the cuddly, let's all be nice to everybody morning TV network being watched by all the mums. So it's a challenge. And coming back, the failure to understand the masculine and feminine, and that we're all both, but in different ratios, and that there's overlap between the two. So some women are more masculine, some men are more feminine. To understand that underlies it all. Like when you see that, it all makes sense.
Once you get that,
it's easy.
Everything else is nonsense. It's like, oh my God, that's great. Like, oh, yeah. And to pick up on the point about forgetting that we're the adults and the kids are the kids, which I have to remind myself of, and Owen has to remind me of, like, you said that, do that. There's a good example of masculine opinion. Like this morning, you know, we'd had a conversation with Charlie, who's 4 at the end of July, and we ask him, you know, in the night time before, we give him some choice. So we're not just going, you're the child, you will eat this, for example. So I said, you know, do you want this or this for breakfast? And he chose this. And then in the morning he went, I don't want that, I want that. And I said, no, you chose that, that's what we're having. And then as he's eating it, he's also going, no, I don't want any more. And Owen could see me. I nearly went, oh, okay, let's give you something else. And Owen went, no, that's what you chose. That's what we're having for breakfast. That's what breakfast is. If you're hungry, eat it. If you don't want it, don't eat it. You know, and I'm a coach. I teach this stuff. And then when faced with my child, there's a part of me that's like, I just want a quiet life. Just give the damn kid what they want so that I can have some peace at breakfast time. I'm tired. I stayed up too late last night. And there's the remembering that. And also, so here's the question. As they get old, I'm dealing with this and the kid's not even 4. So then we get to like they're 10, 11, 12, social media's at play. And you were talking about, you know, if a kid starts going down a route that's not okay, like get like social media gone, tablets away, phones take it out. So how do parents, including myself, I'm not just asking this to people listening, I'm like, how the fuck am I going to deal with this? How do we, and I think this is maybe the thing where everyone's getting so confused, right? Because it's like, oh, we can't dominate or be horrible or nasty to our kids. And yet we're still supposed to be the parents, but there's this whole narrative of patriarchy and abuse and domination. How do you navigate that with a kid when you're going, I'm the adult, you're the child? How do we choose at what point a kid gets a phone? People ask me that all the time. Well, when do I give my kid a phone? What do I let them on? At what point can they go on social media? I've just asked you like 50 questions.
So a rule of thumb when it comes to tech, I would say, is being the strictest 5% of parents. Mm-hmm. If you're not in the strictest 5% of parents, you are too relaxed and you're letting them have too much, right? Because their brains are not developed. The prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain which has to assess risk and make judgments, is fully developed at the age of 25, right?
Oh, 25, ladies and gents, listen up.
25. Whereas the part of the brain that feels emotions and wants to act impulsively in response to emotions, we're born with, right? There's a reason why 17-year-olds pay more to insure their car than 50-year-olds. It's because they do dumb shit and they don't think it through, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, would you let your 12-year-old drive your car? Obviously, you wouldn't. You'd be stupid, right? So, when you get, there's a reason also that 12-year-olds are not allowed to drink alcohol or smoke cigarettes or gamble, because these things are all very addictive. So with tech, what I would invite you to consider is that every device, phone, iPad, laptop, whatever, has been designed to maximize engagement. Like it's been designed. These are $1 trillion industries, and it's all focused on maximizing engagement. Right? That is the absolute number one thing. And every single app, computer game or app or social media network or whatever, every single piece of software is also designed to maximize engagement with that piece of software. Again, $1 trillion industries. If you think the people of Silicon Valley haven't spent some time analyzing what works to maximize engagement, then I've got a bridge to sell you, right? That's their number one flipping thing, right?
Yeah. And I'd even go so far as to say, even if you know that, like I did, I then watched The Social Dilemma on Netflix.
Right, I was going to say that.
Oh my God, it's even worse than I imagined it.
Go on watch The Social Dilemma on Netflix, right? Which is like a little documentary with people who've worked in these. One of the guys in it is the guy who invented the like button. The like button. He invented it, right? And he's talking about it, right? So these people are talking about that, and you're like, oh my God. And you know, I mean, to some extent, they're aware of it, and they're trying to kind of moderate it. Even these people in the show have all left these organizations now, but even the people there they're kind of like mindful of it, and they're trying. But of course, the genie's out of the bottle, and they're trying to ride a tiger now, right? So you know, if that's something that reduces engagement, it hits their profits. So it's very difficult for them. They're going to say, "Oh, we're going to sacrifice a load of profit to be nice." It's very hard for an organization to do that. So you take this device, which is, crikey, we as adults all know how addictive it is, right? You give this
I've done stuff on social media myself going, I think I need to come off this because I'm scrolling and I don't want to fucking scroll.
Or you go, oh my God, I've been on it, I've done that much time on it this week. Oh my God, what have I been doing in my life? Right? So we all know it's really addictive. You're going to give, otherwise, basically it's what you're doing. If you give your kid the legal age, isn't it, for registering, this is American rules, right? For registering on social media and all that stuff, and Google is 13. Obviously, loads of people break that, but the legal age is 13. But even let's just be conservative and imagine that everyone follows rules. And at 13, you're basically saying, hey, here's access to a cabinet full of addictive substances. Here's some cocaine, some alcohol, some mind-numbing substances, gambling. So if this teenagehood ever gets a bit challenging, you ever feel a bit upset, a bit confused, fucking just tuck in, man. Help yourself. You just go for it. This will numb the feelings. This will make it better. At their 13-year-old brain. They've got no chance. Some will resist it and some won't. Some won't get caught up in it. My daughter's never been that caught up in it. We were pretty strict. Her mum's pretty strict, stricter than me even.
And what do you and what's strict? Like, what does that look like?
I say being so ideally, your kid wouldn't have a smartphone. So there's a school in London, the Michaela School, which is like a really great school. It's very strict, traditional, in a very poor area that's been set up by a woman called Catherine Birbal Singh, who is now, it's a great head teacher. I follow her. She's from the Caribbean, and she is now, I think, the government's educational equality czar or something like that, right? She's been picked up, and she set up this school, government funded in the UK, and it's a poor area, right? And they do it by lottery who gets into the school. So there can't be you can't move to the area and put house prices up to get your kid in because it's still only got a 1 in 3 chance of getting in, right? And so it's got a wide catchment by lottery. And the kids are mainly black or Asian in origin, and they're all, the standards are really high, and the kids doing really well. Loads of them are going to Oxford and God knows what, right? Like she's really knocking the ball out of the park, right? And she makes the kids walk between lessons, between classes. They have to walk single file in the corridor in silence without talking. Right. So it looks like, my God, this is really, really strict. And so, lots of people get upset with her, because the kids are really happy and well adjusted and doing brilliantly, but you're being mean to them or some flipping nonsense like that. Right. And if they don't wear the right school uniform, they get sent home. And if they haven't, one thing she hit the headlines because some kids the parents hadn't paid their bills for their school meals, their lunches or something. So she made them eat separately or something on a different table. Right. Like she doesn't put up with bullshit. Another thing is like, we're the teachers, we're going to teach. It's not this kind of like, oh yeah, all the kids can just teach each other nonsense. It's like, we're the kids, we're going to teach. We have expertise to impart. Now, pros and cons to that, but the kids do really well. She actually she offers for sale to all the parents Nokia brick phones. So old style Nokia phones. All they will do is text and call. That is it. And she now obviously not all the parents take her up on that, but she offers them for sale so the kids can have. So a load of kids have only got these phones. Now, of course, because it's done as a school-wide thing, it can kind of become part of the culture, and the kids don't, they kind of accept it, right? If your kid is the only kid at their school who hasn't got an iPhone and they've got this brick, they're going to get shit for that, right? It's going to be tough.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of gold standard that I would invite people to aspire to. The idea they need social media to learn about technology or to learn about it, or it's going to be yes, it is going to be the future, and they can use it. But they'll pick it up in bloody 5 minutes anyway.
We all picked it up, right? We didn't grow up with it. We picked it up. We're doing a podcast now live on YouTube, no issues.
Exactly. You give an 18-year-old, you take an 18-year-old from the flipping jungle who's never seen civilization, who grew up in the remote Amazon, and assume that they can deal with modern life, and you give them a smartphone, they'll have figured it all out in a few months, right? They'll think that the learning will be so quick. So it's not like, if they're not on Instagram when they're 10, they're going to be behind in their social influencer career. No. Some, there'll be outliers. Some kids come out, some kids won't get addicted. Some kids will just have a phone but not really use it very much. You will see those examples, right? Some kids will build a social media, be making hundreds of thousands a month at the age of 15, 16. That's going to happen more and more, right? But those are the outliers. The vast majority of kids is going to get sucked into consuming and just absorbing this stuff and getting addicted, and it's not doing their brains any good. It's not doing their brain development. It's not doing their myelination of their nervous system any good. It's not. There's very little upside to it. There's lots of downside. So I would say you want to be in the 5% strictest parents. if you live in a rough area where a lot of the kids are quite feral anyway, and the parents aren't very good at setting boundaries, you want to be in the 1% strictest. But I work with middle class, coming to see me, bring your kids to see me is not cheap, right? So I get some very affluent parents bring their kids to me, and doctors and stuff, and then they're saying to me, "Oh, can you tell my 10-year-old to stop using his tablet at night? I've been keep telling him, but he won't listen to me." And I'm like, "Excuse me, who's the parent here? What is going on? You are the parent. Take the fucking thing away. The kid can't have it. That's it. Or you limit it, or you only make it make it weekends only, or you put parental controls on it. The other thing is have parental controls on it, so this stuff is automated rather than having to fight a battle all the time and manage it. Keep reminding them and forgetting and all this kind of stuff. Have it automated so the thing cuts out after a certain length of time, and have days of the week. The other thing about technology is have days of the week when there's none. So even if you allow them access every day, they are allowed access. Limit it, but also have say on a Tuesday, ideally one of the weekend days and one of the weekdays where there's zero access. Because the whole thing about an addiction is you want it every day. So if you have 24 hours without it, it breaks the pattern. Alcoholics want alcohol every day, not 5 days a week. So you break the pattern. That's another tip.
And at what? So if all their friends at school have got an iPhone, because and this is again, my friends have got kids that are older, and this is general, average, whatever, when they go to secondary school, they're allowed a smartphone, which again, I'm just like, oh, really? They've literally got, like, it's a brilliant analogy, just help yourself to that cabinet there of crack and heroin and alcohol and gambling and cigarettes. They literally have, that's what's so ridiculous about the phone, right? It's like, what do you want to see? Do you want to see someone being beheaded? Do you want to see sex? It's all there on Google. We're not talking about logging into the dark web, are we? It's like, no. Oh, I want to know about XYZ. So how do you do it? You're physically taking the phones off kids if they do have one. It's like they're allowed it at set times, and then it's
I said the parental controls work such that you set up the times when it works. So my daughter did get a smartphone when she started at senior school, but it was like really the most basic. And this is obviously 8 years ago, but also it was the really basic one. So theoretically, you could do things on it, but you couldn't really. You could so she felt like she had a screen that
it looked like everyone else.
It looked right, but there were kids at her school who had brand new iPhones at that age, right, which was nuts. But she didn't feel, but it couldn't really do the stuff. But then you get the parental control apps, and there are many. You just Google. If your kid's got an iPhone, you just Google best parental control apps 2022 for iPhone, and there'll be articles all about comparing them. And you probably pay a subscription of £5 a month or something, and you have an app on your phone, and you can control what works on their phone and what doesn't. So you can set it so that it only works for a certain number of hours per day. So you can say, right, I set it right. Her phone only works between 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. And for that time, it only works for a maximum of an hour during the week or 90 minutes at weekends. And also certain apps will block. So you can make it, you block all apps except the ones you opt in to allow. That's the way to do it. And then you don't allow them to have access to the app store. You don't allow them to have access to internet browser or you, because obviously if they've got access to the app store, they can download other stuff, right? So you just make it really strict. So you block it. And then what happened is, depending how you set it up, they'll get a 5-minute warning. This phone will turn off in 5 minutes. And then after 5 minutes, the phone turns off. Or it only works for calls. Or you can have it so that in the evening they can access the app that they need for homework for school, but they can't access the other stuff that you can do. There's different ways of doing it. Unfortunately, a lot of schools are giving the kids tablets and laptops and saying they've got to do their work on that, which I think is a disaster. But so really, in terms of like, what if all their friends have got smartphones? This is one of the ways in which ideally you want to curate your friends, your kids' peer group. One of the reasons I said my daughter went to private school for senior school, and one of the reasons that we really pushed the boat out and made that happen was to have a higher quality peer group. And what I mean by that is at private fee-paying school, I know that the parents are committed to their kids' education. Obviously, in a regular school, a lot of parents are, but some parents aren't, right? So I know that. Whereas if they're paying the money,
there's less control, when it's not private.
If they're paying the money, generally, again, it's not going to be. There's some bad parents there, right?
Sure.
But generally speaking, the parents are very committed to their kids' education, and therefore that rubs off on the kids. Plus, you've got smaller class sizes. The whole culture. It's about the culture. It's not about better teaching or better sports facilities. All that's nice. It was about culture and peer group, right?
Yeah.
So, and also I might monitor what's going on. Chat to them at the dinner table. Always have meals together at the dinner table as a family. Always, same with dinner, and chat to them about what's going on and how so-and-so getting on with so-and-so. Meet the other kids, meet the other parents, find out what's going on, and then just kind of don't ask direct questions like that they might kind of clam up to, but just kind of invite them to chat about what's happening and who said what to who and who's friends with who and who's got annoyed with, and you can just feel have your antennae out for little things. And also you can ask her about bullying. Who's been bullied at school? Have you been bullied? You know, and just little antennae. Luckily she was at school, there was very little bullying. She'd go, oh, no bullying, no. And you'd be okay, fine. Because the kids know, right? And then if you need to, approach the school and deal with stuff, right? Do not be shy about that. No way. And then if there are kids that are dodgy and aren't a good influence, reduce the contact with them. If there are kids that are on smartphones, on porn sites, and smoking weed, those aren't the kids. You want to reduce that. But it's very difficult, of course, once there's already happening, to then pull your child back from that. So it's about the earlier you start curating their peer group. I mean, it probably doesn't matter when they're very little, but once you get to, I would say, 10 or something like that, you want to really start be active in curating who they hang out with.
And in a way, there's a whole world. I mean, I moved around a lot as a kid, probably where some of my issues came from. Quite, every 3 or 4 years. So when we went from Zimbabwe to Switzerland when I was 4, then we went from Switzerland to the UK when I was 7. Then I had a primary school of 60 kids and went to a private school where none of my friends went. So actually, I would also argue the earlier you can curate it, and it's why I'm highly driven to put my kids in the same school from all the way through, and private school as well, to get that kind of continuity. Because the thing I constantly dealt with was, fuck, where's all my friends gone again? Fuck, where's all my friends gone again? And then 2 years into secondary school, we moved from England to Wales, from a private school to an inner city comp. And it was like, how are you going to curate a friendship there? Like, my parents didn't stand a chance, right?
With your English public school accent in your English private school accent in Wales, yeah, it'd go over there well, right?
Yeah, you can imagine it, right? It's just I was fucked from the start. It's just game over. But so I would also argue, actually curating it as early as possible, because actually having a peer group in primary and then going somewhere completely different, which is what happened to me,
right? That
was actually really tough. So my parents thought they were doing the best thing. They sent me to private school as secondary school. And I look back now and the school was a fucking dream. It was brilliant. There were carpets on the floor and stuff. When I went to Cardiff to an inner city, like, comp school, I was walking around going, holy shit, what is this? It was crazy. I really, I'd gone from a primary school with 60 kids in the whole school, not in my year group, to a private school, to a school of 2,000 kids, where the kids basically ignored the teachers. We used to have to be quiet and stand up as the teacher walked in the room. It's just, curating that. It's tough. So
choose,
I suppose, planning,
Yeah, so choosing. I mean, this is, every parent's thought about this. What school do I want my kids to go to? Or am I going to home educate them? Which is another option, which I'm seriously thinking about for Theo.
Really?
But we haven't got to worry about that yet. So, because, the other thing, just that occurred to me, which will lead back to something we were talking about earlier, was about the gender confusion that's so prevalent. So I've had clients of kids who bring their kids to me like 11, 12, and the mother say to me, we moved schools for senior school, and at this school, about 50% of the kids in her class think they're LGBT. 50%. I've also had heard this anecdotally from other sources as well in other places. I don't think this is everywhere, but there are some years of 12-year-old kids where half the class thinks they're LGBT. Now, obviously they're not. Obviously, it's all in their head. And obviously,
it's just exploring, isn't it? It's doing what kids are going. Who am I? What am I? What am I into?
Yeah, and it could be
where it starts.
Harmless, right? I mean, I wondered about my sexual orientation. I remember asking my mum when I was, I don't know, something like 12, do you think I might be gay? I remember asking her that because I wondered. And she said to me, well, given how you talk about girls, I don't think so. And I went, oh yeah, that's true. And that was it. You know, that was the end. So I did wonder about those things. And, you know, probably most people at some point have some degree of same-sex attraction, or find people that you get infatuated with, have a crush on, or whatever. I think women more than men, even, but even most guys, right? It's a taboo thing for guys to talk about. Girls are much more open about it. But then the problem with that is then you've got to make it into an identity, and you've got to give yourself a label. That's where it isn't exploration. That's where it's dangerous bullshit. So if you've got a kid, if you've got a kid that's in a situation where there's that kind of numbers of kids in the class thinking like that, I would also be, you know, you might be your kid might be in the 50% that doesn't buy into it. If you've got them to, I would. My daughter has gone through a situation where there's quite a lot of that, not as much as we talk, but there's some of that, and she's like, just keeps her mouth shut and rolls her eyes and just lets them all get on with it, right? And she doesn't think like that. So if you've got the foundations and the inoculations in place, they may sail through it or not be affected. But if they are kind of wobbly and unsure and kind of getting drawn into it, and they come home one day, as this girl did, and tell their parents that, oh, I think I'm a lesbian at the age of 12, and it wasn't based on anything except that everyone else, so you've got to have some identity to kind of have currency in the peer group. Then you say that's a suboptimal environment. Let's put it that way.
And how does this differ with boys and girls in this scenario?
In what sense?
Well, in the growing up social media, I have a belief, which may be completely flawed, that boys care, you know, going back to the playground, boys are playing football, girls are chatting, boys end up playing computer games, girls end up on social media, would be where I would, you know, go. Is there a different way to deal with phones and social media and all of that world with boys and girls? And do we need to be more mindful of our girls and social media, and more mindful of boys and computer games? Or is it looking at the whole thing of how much are they doing it? What are they into? Where's the pitfalls? Because we haven't really spoken about computer games.
Yeah,
that's a huge area that's a similar thing, right?
Yeah, and there's a load of social interaction on computer games. A lot of kids that I work with get bullied on the computer games, or they'll be chucked off. They're not, because they're all playing with each other online, right? And they'll be excluded or sworn at in the chat. Sometimes it's verbal chat, sometimes it's typed, whatever, I don't know. Always you deal with it on a case-by-case basis, because everyone's an individual. But yes, as a general trend, girls are probably going to, the quality of bullying amongst girls can be more, you know, mothers are always telling me this as well, you know, the bitchiness and the manipulation, all that kind of stuff. Whereas boys, it will tend to be a bit more explicit and straightforward and like clear, like, you know, everyone knows what's happening and no one's pretending otherwise, right? So I think that the risks aren't particularly, basically the child will go and do what they do, and then you deal with those risks and you mitigate those risks. So the girl's going on Instagram, or wants to go on Instagram or Snapchat, you keep her off that, or at the very least, if she gets on it later on, you let her on later than everybody else, and then you make sure she's got everything, her privacy setting set really high and all that kind of stuff. Whereas if the boy is going into the computer game world, you know, you deal with the equivalents in that world. So it makes it slightly different flavors, but in principle, it'll be the same thing.
Cool. And what if someone's listening to this going, I'm already down one of the many rabbit holes we've spoken about? I mean, we've spoken about getting help, right? Getting therapy, getting people involved. I guess from my point of view, you know, as a coach would be like, don't ignore it. Don't wait. Don't think it's going to get better. It's like, deal with it.
So obviously you can get help from somebody, you know, me or you or various other professionals and you can, one of the most powerful influences is peer group. And I mean that for the parents and for the child, right? Just as we were talking about earlier, if you want to have a great marriage, learn from and hang out with people who've got great marriages, right? If you want to raise great kids, learn from and hang out with, both in your, you know, your actual social environment, people you hang out with and see and talk to, but also learn from online or read books from people who've raised great kids. And if you want your kids to be balanced and empowered, get them hanging out with other kids that are balanced and empowered. rather than, so a change of environment and a change of peer group can be really powerful. And that can be positive or negative, because say if they go online and start hanging out with kids that are really troubled and confused, they're going to go more down that rabbit hole, right? So you need to get them away from that shit and get them into more constructive circles. So, for example, one of the things which we haven't touched on, which I thought we might, but we were saying slightly tangential, but single mums might sometimes.
Yeah, no, it's a great, that's a really good. So one of my next questions was like, and what about people who are divorced, or what about people who haven't got a partner, all of that. So no, great, let's go there.
So I have clients who are lesbian couples who've got sons, or the father died, or I've had clients where there was never a father. It was a woman who decided to have a baby through sperm donation, and there basically never was a man in the picture, right? And has got a boy. And so one of the things, particularly boys, as they go into puberty, but even before that, really want and need male inputs. So if that's their dad and he's present, or you're divorced but he's still really involved and committed and engaged, obviously that's ideal. If it's uncles, if it's grandfathers, that's also great. It can also, if you're part of a religious community, it might be elders in the church or whatever, or pastors and stuff. But also sports coaches, sports teams. Just getting them some male input will, obviously from trustworthy men that you trust and think are good role models, obviously you've got to curate that as well. But I would certainly recommend that for single, because that's the classic. We don't tend to have single fathers of girls saying, how do I find women to help give input to my daughter? Because that's really easy. If you're a single, if your wife has died, or if you're divorced like I was, and you've got a daughter, I mean, her mum gave a lot of input, but if you then go, oh, I need some women to help be maternal with my daughter, you'll be inundated. They'll be flocking.
Too many.
Because that's the feminine, the maternal instinct, right? Whereas the other way around, when you're the mother with the single son, that's more challenging. Right? But getting them some input and being again, it involves some letting go on your part as the mother, because if you're a single mother, or you're clients where the father had died, for example, or been divorced, and the dad was moved to another continent, then what you'll tend to do is you'll tend to close down and go into your masculine, because you're in survival mode, which require you've got to protect, you've got to fight off the wild animals on your own, right? So you'll go into survival mode, and you will tend to close down and become quite masculine, your feminine, nurturing side, because you're trying to fulfill both roles. Plus, you've got to be the protector. And whereas then, when you let other men come in and be guys and be father figures to your children, girls need this too, right? It's not just sons.
Absolutely.
When you get becoming fathers, you are letting go. You've got to let go. So the things you talked about right at the beginning of this chat, Alex, about how do I, when Owen wants to, how do I let him sort of be rough and tumble and just kind of let the boys get on with their thing and think, okay, that's not my part, right? Like that's going to be tricky for a single mum who's used to kind of like, got to protect and control everything, right? So that's going to be the challenge for her. So the gold standard for that single mum, the gold standard would be for her to get married to a great guy who's willing to take on her kids. That'd be the gold standard, right? And you might go, whoa, you're not asking much, are you, Kevin? That's easier said than done. Yeah, obviously it is, right? But I'm just saying that would be the gold standard. So, for example, for me, when I split up with my daughter's mum when she was 4, her mum has always been very present in her life, for sure. But there were also certain things about, her mother that had me want my daughter to get different input and different feminine influences. It's kind of why we got divorced, right? Why I ended that marriage. And
sure.
And I wasn't ready yet at that point to get married to somebody else. I had a lot of work to do. I had to learn the things I've learned and deal with some of my past and childhood stuff. But I always knew that I wanted to get to a point where I would be happily married. It's partly for me, obviously, but partly so my daughter would see that, right? So that she would have that model of seeing that marriage can work, rather than having, because her mother hasn't remarried or even dated anybody since, as far as I know. So I wouldn't want my daughter to see her two parents split up and then that was it. There's no marriage after that, because then she wouldn't have that model. So flipping that round for a single mum, if they can do that, that's the gold standard. But obviously bring other guys in as they can as well.
And I'd even add that, you know, women who are not single, whose husbands and themselves, like, you know, put myself in this camp, right? We're working a lot. And actually, it's that the old saying of it takes a village to raise a child. Actually, just to having that children, you know, my kids, having lots of adults that fucking care about them and spend time with them and give them attention. So when I'm not the right person for my boys to come to, or Owen's not, they've got countless others that they can go and talk to. Because there's going to come a time, isn't there, where they don't want to talk to mum about whatever's going on, or they might not want to talk to dad, even if we're, you know, available and pay attention and all of that. So even to people who are in a couple, it's like, who else is there? What other adults have the kids got available? You know, what other influences are there, you know, outside of ourselves?
Yeah, so if you could have, so that idea of it takes a village to raise a child in Africa, and saying there's part of it I really agree with, part of it I completely disagree. It depends on the context, as always. Context is decisive, right? So in what you're describing, so what it's about is people who know each other and have reciprocal relationships and care about each other. That absolutely I agree with. So, and you've got that because, you know, you're living in an area, part of the world where you've got some roots. Your husband's got some roots, definitely where you live, isn't he?
And we've stayed on purpose to keep that. Like, you know, there's, I don't want to live in Newport, right? But it's powerful to have that. Right.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the kind of positive image where it can be that phrase can be used and hijacked. Like Hillary Clinton used that phrase recently, a few years ago. It takes a village to raise a child, and then Thomas Sowell, who's a black sociologist and economist, said it takes a village idiot to believe that. Right? It doesn't take, because what he's saying is she was using it in the context about state intervention. So let the government do more. You know, that's all as a community part. Kind of, you know, the school. And that's how it can be misinterpreted. So I want to clarify.
That's not my village.
No, exactly.
Keep my kids away from that village.
Exactly. Bingo. So if someone used it in that context. Of a government official or educator, it takes a visual, it'd be like, no thanks, mate. I'll pick and select the members that my personal village are. So a lot of the things from our tribal roots really translate well to modern society, but a lot of things don't. So, for example, some tribal cultures don't have monogamy, right? They have primary relationships, so husband and wife, but then also they can have affairs and it's all fine. And if your wife gets pregnant by another guy, it's all fine. And you just treat them as your own. And that's totally accepted, right? And of course, that would work. That works in a when there's 100 people, they all know each other and there's all this reciprocity. That really works. But you can't transplant that to flipping London in 2022 when nobody knows her. It's all anonymous. Oh, well, if my wife gets pregnant by someone else, I'll just raise her. Because there's not the reciprocity, right? So, but what you've got, where you're talking about it, absolutely,
Cool. Kevin, we've been talking for 2 hours and 36 minutes.
Yeah, I know.
And I feel like if we got into another subject, we could go for another 2 or 3. So I feel like it's a good time to round off. And is there anything else to say about masculine, feminine, bringing up children? I mean, I get we could talk about it all day long, right? But is there anything else that you think?
Well, I think this the recap thing would be understanding the masculine, feminine dynamic. And I think David Dieda, The Way of the Superior Man. Some people will be triggered by that title. That's their problem. Just get over yourself and read it. It's a great book. And some of it, he's got some real woo-woo spiritual stuff in there. He does all this stuff about semen retention and, so not ejaculating in sex to men, all this other kind of stuff. And I'm like, I'm not really interested in that. But the core of it, even the introduction, even the 10-page introduction is fantastic, right? It will cover a lot of what we said. Get that, understand that, and then start to communicate that to your kids. And, then you have conversations with your partner, your spouse, whatever, and you actually start to live it. And, he was saying that, for example, do not expect the feminine to make a decision, right? Women can make decisions, but when a woman makes decisions, she goes into her masculine, which is why when my wife says, where are we going for dinner? The wrong answer would be, oh, where do you want to go? No, don't fucking say that. That's nuts. Don't say that, because then she'll get really pissed off at you. Why is she getting pissed off at me? She asked me where I wanted to go, and I said it's up to her. I gave her the choice. Why is she annoyed? Because she doesn't what she wants. Because you forced her into her masculine. She wants to stay in her feminine and let you make the decision, right? So just pick a bloody restaurant. Now, if I say we're going to this, And then my wife says, "Oh, I actually don't want Indian." I go, "Okay, well, we can go this." You know, it's not like she has to go with what I said, right? But I make the decision, right? Similarly, I saw a clip this morning from a female dating coach who I follow, and she said, if you want to keep polarity, here's a magic phrase, a script to use, a feminine script in relationship when your husband, your partner, your man is asking you for lots of input. So, and the script is, "Honey, I trust you to figure it out." She said, "Say, honey, I trust you to figure it out." She said, and obviously it doesn't apply in emergency situations where something's happening really bad, right? Emergency. But generally speaking, if you want to preserve the polarity in the relationship, you say, "Honey, I trust you to figure it out." Now,
because that's actually what the guy's looking for, right? I mean, in the surrendered wife, same thing.
Guys love that, right? And the fact that the book you read, you talked about, I know we talked about before, The Surrendered Wife by Laura Dore, right, which you found really useful.
Triggers lots of people.
Yeah, the title.
Get over it, ladies. Read the damn book.
The Surrendered Wife. My God, what an internalized misogyny, feminist bitch, or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, it's bad, right? So the surrender. So when you say, I trust you to figure it out, and he may be he may be trying to go into his feminine and kind of like get you to lead. But when you say that, that's you'll be going to your feminine or push him more into his masculine. And that's why, similarly, the male equivalent of that is when she's going, you say, "Honey, it'll be fine. I will sort it out. I'm doing it. I will sort it out." Even if you don't know what you're going to do and you haven't figured it out yet, just tell her, "I will sort it out." No.
Don't worry about it. I got it.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry. I'll handle it, right? Because then she can relax into her feminine, right, and let go. And obviously, when I've got a baby and a 2-week-old baby and that phrase is coming up quite a lot. But she's also got stuff she wants organised, but it's like, I need to get it. So, no, I will sort it out. No, you're not doing that. I will sort it out.
I would love those listening. Feel free to contact either Kevin or myself, or put comments wherever you're listening to this to that. Try it on. So anyone who's going, just try it, ladies. Just try it. The way I say it is I say, whatever you think. If I'm asked my opinion on something that Owen's dealing with, and I'm in, I have a wife hat, right? If he sometimes he says to me, "I need you in coach mode. I need to talk about this property deal." Fine, we're really clear how I'm speaking. But other than that, if I'm, we're at home, I'm like, whatever you think's best. And it's the same as that sentence. And I absolutely, when you said that, like when a guy says, or when Owen says, "Don't worry, I've got this," I'm just like, oh yes. And I can literally just stop worrying about it and move on, So I invite anyone listening, like, try that on, whether you're a man or a woman. We've given you the sentences. If you're gay, if you're masculine, feminine, same thing.
Try it on, absolutely. And I remember, perhaps I'll just leave with this example, just triggered me when you said that. When I was reading and learning about this stuff, and I was first with my wife, I remember one day we were on the bed, fully clothed, right? We were fully clothed. I was lying on the bed and she was sitting astride me. We were both fully clothed, both had jeans on, right? Yeah. And she just kind of started like throwing herself forward onto the bed and throwing her hands on the bed. I could repeat things. She went, "Oh my God," she went, "I can finally relax. Oh, I can finally let go. I can just finally stop being in trouble. I can finally relax." And I was like, wow, this is what David talks about, man. This is it. Yeah. So after all those years of her being in the masculine, she finally felt able to let go and relax and trust me. And she just felt this peace and fulfillment that she'd never felt before. And me too.
And then you have a magical sex life. Just saying. I mean, what's the difference between friends and intimate relationship? It's the sex life, right? It's like,
you're not your husband and wife or your boyfriend. You're not friends. It's a sexual relationship, for Christ's sake. You're not thinking, we've got to be friends.
If you're not having sex, honey, there's something wrong. Guys, if you're not having sex, there's something wrong. That's like the red flag of, hang on, this isn't an intimate relationship anymore. We're mates living together. We've all been there.
The polarity is gone. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a topic for another conversation, perhaps.
That is how to have good sex. We basically covered it today, but it would be a catchier headline, wouldn't it? We'd get more sex sales. How to be rich and have great sex. Maybe we should call a podcast that. Kevin, it's been a pleasure. I think it will be good. Actually, we'll put some of the books we've mentioned in the comments and any others. Another one that came up for me was why, and I was put off by the title for the opposite of The Surrendered Wife. It was Why Men Love Bitches. Very similar to what actually we've been talking about. Not at all how I thought it would be, very similar to The Surrendered Wife, but I think it would be good for us to come up with a few recommendations for people who have listened to this and gone, oh, hang on, this is new. I'm interested, but where do I start? We'll put a book reading list together and stick it in the comments for women and men, and both read each, right? It's like I've read the David Dieda books and vice versa. It sounds like you've read The Surrounded Wife. So indeed, thank you for your time and your expertise.
You're welcome. Come and follow me on Twitter at Kevin Burch, BURCH, so you, and you can follow all the controversy and arguments with the crazy.
Yeah, so anyone who does like arguments, controversy, find Kevin on Twitter. And where else are you, Kevin? I know you're not a big fan of Insta.
No, my website is skyhighconfidence.com. You can sign up and get on my mailing list at skyhighconfidence.com, and you can read about how I work with children and adults in more confidence and parents. Insta is 2/3 women, 1/3 men. Twitter is 2/3 men. Well, I was going to say, where can women find you, right? Because I hate Twitter. I'm on it, but I hate it. Instagram, there's all these like pictures and stuff. Who cares about the picture? Just get on with the words, man. Let's get on with actually what we want to say.
Cool. And we'll put your website link and my website link and everything in the thing. But the main message, I think, is don't stay stuck, people. Don't stay stuck. Find the help. Read the books. Find people to be with. Great message today.
Hang out with the right people who've got the results that you want.
Yeah. You can't and actually, people have done that by listening to the podcast, right? That includes TV. I remember a coach saying to me years ago, if you're watching EastEnders and Coronation Street, you're hanging out with those people and spending time with them. So it includes what we consume, right? Includes if you've listened to this podcast, you've already done that for the last, if you stayed with us for 2 hours and 45 minutes, people have just done that, right? So 100%. Really cool. Amazing. Thanks, Kevin. We will no doubt do this again in a few months' time.
Look forward
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Bye, everyone.
Bye.